Council has ploughed ahead with their plans to introduce HVO to power waste disposal trucks, as their desire to make this district net zero seems to supersede and dominate all other activities. £750,000 have been set aside for this. The truth is, though, that 20% of this district will not benefit from this initiative, as Warwick District Council provides the hub for vehicles in the east of the district, and they flatly refuse to get involved with this nonsense, and therefore none of the trucks that serve the southern area are being powered by the alleged green fuel that is HVO. In our alternative budget, the Conservatives wanted more financial support for victims of domestic abuse. All Lib Dem councillors, including the newly elected MP, voted against this. It truly is therefore heartbreaking that the figures for 2024 state that the most prevalent crimes in the district were violent and sexual offences, mainly against women. Devastatingly, child hospital admissions caused by unintentional and deliberate injury amongst the 0 to 14-year-olds is significantly higher in this area in both England and the West Midlands average. I doubt that there is a single person in this room that would admit that they are glad that money is still being wasted on HVO rather than supporting this district and supporting the most vulnerable. The number of households living in fuel poverty continues to rise across the district. How do the Lib Dems justify their continual waste of money on greenwashing when what people actually want is support for the most vulnerable in keeping their homes warm right now? 9% of all businesses in this district are associated with agriculture, which is well above the national average. Why then isn't this Lib Dem council doing more to protect agricultural land from development? 1,000 acres already lost to solar panels. In a resident survey conducted this summer, we note the following unpalatable truths, as stated in this paper. Respondents feeling that they could influence decision being made by this council has fallen to a 10-year low. The belief that Stratford-on-Avon District Council is making the area a better place to live is the lowest figure seen over the last 10 years. Despite all your green initiatives, the belief that this council is making the area cleaner and greener is lower than it was in 2014. Tellingly, this Lib Dem council is at a new 10-year low regarding how well residents are informed on what the council spends its money. Don't worry, the Conservatives will be telling them. There's a new 10-year low in those who feel safe after dark, despite all the additional money we've spent on cameras for a control room that still isn't staffed 100% of the time. Your list of achievements include the following initiatives that were set up by the Conservatives when they were in power: the 123 Waste Collection Service, the roundtable event for high-growth businesses in Stratford-on-Avon, the support of the University of Warwick Innovation Campus, the bulk of the work for neighbourhood development plans. The Fund for Rural Businesses was set up under the Conservatives. The vast majority of the work and proposals for the Gateway site were done during the Conservative administration. It was literally oven ready for you. So what have the Lib Dems done that is uniquely theirs? Well, they've introduced a concessionary bus pass for the over 65s, which has brought in a revenue of £8,000 or thereabouts, but which arguably costs more to administer than the income it generates. You've written your own plan for this council, which lacks any success criteria or detailed costings around the plan. And you've introduced the use of HVO. And finally, you've launched a new service to help residents recycle used coffee pods. Your financial balances are going down with scant information of how that money is being spent. Your balances are going down as you fritter away the hard-earned money of our residents, and as a consequence, the interest earned on investments is rapidly diminishing. Winter is coming, and this Labour government will not be kind to shire authorities, as demonstrated by the doubling of housing numbers needed in Stratford-on-Avon. So as I look across this chamber, I am reminded of Winston Churchill's quote, "Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm."
30 seconds, Councillor.
Thank you.
May I ask if any councillors now wish to speak? Councillor Bromwich.
Yeah, this is my 10th year on this council, and I've done 9 East Stage districts. And quite a lot of things don't change, some things do. It's always interesting to note when we talk about spending money where we want to get our priorities as a council. And back at the budget, I pointed out that rather than spending £250,000 a year on HVO fuel, we'd been better off giving that money towards grants for people for home efficiencies.
Can I do a point of order?
This is all part of
Excuse me, councillor. There's a point of order.
The point of order is that the contract is over 3 years. It's not per year, it's over 3 years.
If you want me to rephrase it, I'll rephrase it to 3 years then. Now, it's also interesting, Councillor Junior, you never responded to my email about it, that's another story. But we could have spent that money insulating homes for those most vulnerable, was a proposal that was put forward by myself that could have been put in there, which would have been far more beneficial as a green policy. Then we look in the end that residents in Southern will now come up to me and say, well, if they're paying more money for fuel in Stratford, are we subsidising it out of our council tax money? Because we're not getting the HVO fuel, we're getting diesel, it's cheaper. No. So are we going to rectify that? We've got to justify this to residents when we're spending their money. You can't have one side subsidising another on payments, that's just wrong. We've brought this up many times in the past. I have certainly with the Conservatives beforehand who've been held to task over this by myself. Residents of Southam expect fair treatment, not to be subsidising fuel for somewhere else. Then I look around Southam itself. I grew up in an area of poverty, and it's still an area of poverty, still in that bottom 5%. Each year I stand here at these stage districts and say, we've got to try and give these people more help. I go traipsing around them houses, so when the leader talks about communication, one of the important jobs of a councillor is to communicate to their public. And that's not just putting things on social media, it's doing like this weekend when I had my 1-3 weekend this year. I was traipsing around houses, solving resident issues, trying to help them with things like housing benefit issues, various heating issues, lots of issues and that. Sometimes I think people think we stand here as councillors and it's quite an easy time. We'll post a little thing on Facebook, we might put a leaflet out here occasionally. But I can assure you in the past 10 years I've worn out quite a lot of footwear through good communication, and I'm proud of doing that. And I'm proud of the fact the residents of my ward and its various parts over the past decade have also appreciated and continue to do so. However, when we talk about these people's surveys, it's oddly enough, when you speak to these people, you find they've never had these resident surveys. For whatever reason. And I actually did check up on this over the weekend. 50 houses I spoke to, not one has ever had one of these resident surveys. Which then questions, how accurate are they? Again, it says we're probably not getting something right. And I've brought this up again under the previous administration and under this administration about the importance of engaging not just certain residents, but engaging all residents and getting the broadest possible answers. And that does mean councillors getting off their backsides and actually going round and probably helping out, not just the council itself sending things round. And sometimes I think there's too many councillors that actually don't go on that trek round their wards and don't get involved with their communities that much. People appreciate that door knock.
30 seconds, councillor.
They appreciate the fact that you as councillors are there for them at the good times and more importantly the bad times.
Thank you. Councillor Passingham.
I was interested to read all the facts in this report, and in particular section 6.3 about earnings, in which it says that median gross weekly earnings in 2023 for full-time workers who live in the district but not necessarily working in the district was £725.40p. This was higher than the average for the West Midlands at 641. So I thought that sounds good. It's a reasonably wealthy district and people are earning a lot of money. However, on 6.4, it then continues the median gross weekly earnings in 2023 for full-time workers who worked in the district but not necessarily lived in the district, in other words, the other way around, was £637.50. This is lower than the median average for the West Midlands. In other words, people are travelling to work outside the district for good, well-paid jobs, and people are coming into the district for the service jobs, for the tourism jobs, which are lower paid. And I just think it's something that hopefully will be addressed in the local plan. How do we get good, well-paid jobs in the district, and we have less reliance on tourism and lower paid service jobs?
Thank you, Councillor. May I call on Councillor Orcock?
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points I wanted to raise in this. Excuse me. The first one, 8.25, child hospital admission rates, which also in its own way links into 8.28. What got me about that is the child admission rate caused by unintentional and intentional injuries is far too high. And the reason it's far too high is the fact that, as the same as 8.2.8, mental health support has been cut to the bone, not over the past 18 months, but over the past 15 years. So we do not have the support that our young people desperately need, and people who are having mental health crisis. There is just not support out there, and that is something that must change, because it cannot go on the way it is. With that, you can improve so much for the livelihoods of our residents all over the district who are in desperate need of help and who cannot get it. And it must be something that is looked at. Thank you. I would also like to raise about the 6.3.2 and 6.33 about wages and income for residents. Yes, people might be moving out of the district for the well-paid jobs, but that isn't what struck me. What struck me is, again, still in 2024, the discrepancy between what a male can earn and what a female can earn. Why are we still looking at these numbers? Why? Just why? It shouldn't be like this anymore. It is 2024. We've had the Equality Act in for many decades, and yet we are still looking at a difference of this. And quite frankly, again, it has to change. So these are things that may not be completely within our power as a district council to change, though I'm proud of this district council, the fact we do have the equality pay. But we've got to start looking further out to other places, because this, again, is something that must be changed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Coucher?
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the things that struck me in the members' survey that I think was really important was there is a 72% satisfaction rate in relation to what this council is doing, and that's up 3% from what it was in 22. So I think when Councillor Hoggins suggests that this council is not performing, Wally Hoggins, sorry, I apologise for that, relates to that, saying that this is a failing council. I think she's well wide of the mark. She berates us using the words greenwashing, which, you know, having heard from the first question asked today, there is real concern in this district, as there is in the country, about clearly our climate future and what we're doing in relation to that. And I think this council makes no apologies for putting green policies very high on our agenda going forward in terms of what we're doing. She also makes assertions in relation to our financial status, which is very wide of the mark. This council has very firm and secure financial status going forward, unlike the Conservative-controlled County Council, which is in a complete and utter mess. She also contrasts also in relation to crime. I think forgetting that actually our police and crime commissioner, Conservative, controlled again, has great responsibilities for that. This council is doing what it has to do in matters that really concerns our people in this district. We recognise that we can't do everything across the board, but I think the balance that we have is very good. I think relating to Councillor Passingham's point in relation to the economic strategy, which I was very pleased that we launched in terms of where we're going, how we actually attract more high quality jobs into this district is extremely important. I was very pleased to be with Warwick University earlier on last week, because I think the sort of development that we're going to see at the Wellesbourne campus is just going to provide those kind of jobs that we do need in terms of increasing our income. I think this council is working in a robust way, addressing what real people in Stratford-on-Avon want to see done, and not harping back on the past. Thank you very much indeed.
Councillor Ian Shenton.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to wander into this particular arena. I wanted to talk about recycling, which I think is a good thing. But Councillor Coucher has just made a comment about the County Council's finances being in a mess. I'm not quite sure where he's got that from, because it's totally wrong. There is a difference between cost pressures and dealing with those and a council being in a mess. On that basis, this council would also be in a mess, because there are the same cost pressures applied to this council as to any. So I think Councillor Coucher is ill-informed and should withdraw that. On the subject of greenwashing, Councillor Coucher has also said green policies are high on our agenda. And we spoke, Councillor Junid has spoken about the 123 waste system, and it's up at 60%. And I look on the survey that was done, and that said that 92% of residents were now recycling and reusing as much as possible, compared to 88% in 22 and 91% in 2019, and that's a good thing. That is a very good thing. However, it would be remiss of me not to point out that the Lib Dems did not vote for this. You abstained on the 123 system, and it was the Conservatives that pushed this through. And whilst I'm grateful that Councillor Grocott and now Councillor Junid have admitted that this is a good system, it's quite clear that this was a Conservative-led initiative. The MRF, obviously the material recycling facility, also falls into this. That was an £8 million investment that this authority made, and that again was a Conservative initiative. It got universal approval, which was good, but it was led by the Conservatives. So whilst I think it is good to see that the recycling rates are going up, and hopefully when the next results come out in 2025, we will see that we're the top.
30 seconds, Councillor.
Thank you very much. We'll see that we're at the top of the league, and that is welcome. But as I pointed out, we have to remember that the Lib Dems did not vote for this.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Crump?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I wasn't particularly going to speak about this, but again, we've talked about communications and some failings that we've had, particularly in terms of response rates, which was, the survey was around about 16 to 17% when we spoke at OSC, which we felt would have to be more than 20%. and the fall in the satisfaction rates and etc. in terms of being informed of how and what the council is doing. So I thought we should be concentrating our resources, our scant and precious officer resources, on doing things we can influence, can make a difference of. But all of a sudden we're starting to talk about the county council. And I don't think this is right. I think this is poor use of our officer time, it's poor use of debating time. So let's concentrate on the things that we can influence, not the things that we can't influence, especially when you haven't got all the facts. Because sometimes why let a facts get in the way of a good argument? Certainly I agree with the fact that we do need to improve our communications. The fact it's linked in with the improvements on the website which Councillor Rice is leading, and he gave assurances to me recently as Chair of Scrutiny that he is looking to make things more efficient, and for the use of AI. We had the conversation about artificial insemination as opposed to artificial intelligence over in Scrutiny. It just shows how terminology changed. I'm glad you see you're pleased about that, Councillor Grocott. Obviously your rural farming roots are coming out in terms of artificial insemination there. So I know you like that phrase. I'll keep on mentioning it a few times. But personally, I think we do need to concentrate on what we're doing. We do need to speak to our residents, and particularly in the east of the district that sometimes are cut off or feel. We do need to involve our towns and parishes more and get them to help with us. And also use the voluntary organisations to spread the word so people are getting the benefits that they are entitled to, particularly pension credit, again, which is open to lots of other different benefits that people are entitled to. It is particularly pertinent now we're talking about food poverty motion later and also the winter fuel allowance motions. So there are some links between getting the benefits out to the residents who need them and having an effective communication strategy. So just to sum up, let's concentrate on the things...
30 seconds, Councillor.
Just with my 30 seconds left, Councillor Junior, let's concentrate on the issues that we can influence and not political grandstand, especially when the facts are not exactly right as you're actually portraying. So thank you for that.
Councillor Holmes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment from earlier. So I'm quite deeply saddened that Councillor Woggy-Hoggins has suggested that this council's commitment to environmental protection somehow equates to neglecting victims of domestic violence. This is a serious issue that should not be used for political point scoring, and I know that she's well aware that this responsibility for addressing domestic violence rests with the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner and Conservative-led Warwickshire County Council. However, I want to reassure her that this Lib Dem Council will be wholly supported where we can to support Warwickshire County Council and the Police and Crime Commissioner in reducing domestic violence against women in Stratford-on-Avon district.
Thank you. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to be brief and to not grandstand. I just wanted to point out that we are completely in agreement with the improved access and communications for our residents, especially those in far-flung areas. And so I was really very happy, finally, to be able to announce that the customer access terminal in Southam is up and running, and it does take a very long journey there and back out for our residents for them to be able to talk to our customer services people. Unfortunately, it is always the way that the smallest, cheapest project takes the longest to deliver. However, we've taken the learning from that one, and work is now progressing on the one in Ulster, and I hope to be announced that that one is working too soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader, for the state of the district and taking on board the comments right at the beginning of the meeting about sharing, and we all have a part to play. I'll perhaps offer some constructive pointers towards how the Leader may wish to approach the next state of the district. Firstly, if environmental policies are key to your administration, I wouldn't leave your first mention of anything related to environmental policies as the 12th bullet point in your report. I'd be inclined to be leading with the big ticket items. I wouldn't be leading with neighbourhood development plans where the heavy lifting is done by local residents, and we have a functionary role in supporting that, and our officers do a fabulous job. And we have put through and continue as an authority, and that is something that is a really great thing. But I would just suggest that perhaps you want to think about the things that are making, where you as an as an administration are making a difference. Equally, whilst he is the world's favourite returning officer, our chief executive, it's really in the sort of basic level of making an election happen. It is an achievement, but it is without being too discharitable about it. You know, it's a bit like walking and chewing gum as a public body. We do need to be doing elections. Achievement. I know that the Happy Hammer will have a chat with me after this, but again, in terms of what we're doing to make a difference to our residents, is that really where you should be leading? I'll come back to bullet point 12. I could have misread this because I am a simple Brummie boy. I'm not entirely sure what changes were introduced a year ago. Now, it may well be that the leader's referencing the introduction of the 1-2-3 system. I might have missed a refinement to the system that's making it even better than the system that the then Liberal Democrat opposition could not bring itself to vote in support on the day. It's just a fact, fellow members. You couldn't bring
30
yourself
seconds,
to do
Councillor.
it. So I'll wrap up with progress for 23-24. Next time when you're reporting on progress, please include something that's objective, smart, achievable, relevant, time-based. Tell us what you're actually doing rather than talking about narratives. I've got nothing to measure and I'm a resident. I don't understand what you've actually achieved in the last 12 months. So make it simple, make it measurable, make it something you can actually demonstrate you've done.
3 minutes.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak on this debate? Councillor Littlewood.
Thank you, Chair. It's an interesting report, and we've had a very, very nice presentation of the good bits. What about the bad bits? We haven't heard much about that. 16 to 64-year-olds, unemployment or employment down 7%. Earnings in the district down compared to outside the district. House prices inside the district higher than outside of the district. And that's because we're getting lots of people coming in from Coventry and Birmingham to live in a nice rural community where they're nice and safe, and they're putting up the house prices. And they can afford to do so because the earnings are higher. So I don't see this necessarily being such a good thing. And the younger adults, they're taking the brunt of this employment issue. So, looking at the report, yes, there are some good bits. You've inherited a lot from the previous administration. I hope you do well with it, but at the moment, let's concentrate on the bad bits as well. And I think it's rather like looking at a report that you wrote yourself and saying how wonderful it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any more speakers before I call on the leader to sum up? No? Thank you. May I call on Councillor Junid, please?
Thank you very much indeed for all the input. One of the things that is not actually in the progress report, because the announcement came forward later, is that the Community Climate Change Fund, the second phase, is now live. Please make sure that you as councillors put that forward to your residents. And can I say some of the marvellous stuff that I've seen as I've gone around to see what the residents have been doing with that Community Climate Change Fund. This is a small amount of money, but they've done some terrific work. For example, in Great Ulm, the residents cleared out drains and they managed to get 5 tonnes of silt. These are the residents. They worked with the county, but it was the residents that did the work. At Snitterville Village Hall, with the air source for heat pump, they were able to get a fantastic amount of match funding because we were able to start the fund. all across the district, some of those the residents groups are doing some terrific work, and we need to work more with those. The other thing that is not mentioned in here is some of the other achievements that we've received. And again, it requires us to go out and work with our leisure centres, etc. We managed to succeed in getting a grant for decarbonising our leisure centre, the swimming pool in Stratford, but also we're now negotiating on other schemes across the district. And please, where you've got volunteer groups, where you've got community groups, please point them out towards the fund and where they can do and the work that they're able to do with us. That's something that we as councillors can do and make sure that information gets out there and that we harness the work that residents do in this district. It is absolutely fantastic, and I really would like to be able to say thank you so much to every single resident that's done that and taken part. On the things like the population and the housing, much of that is down to the fact that the last local plan, and particularly the gap in the last local plan that occurred around about 2014, 15, 16, when there was no local plan and a lot of land came through and was unable to be resisted. And I think this council spent something like 2.2 million on making sure that fighting appeals from developers who had got land and wanted planning permission and had to be given that planning permission because there was no way in which they could hold back on that because there was no local plan. So when it comes to value for money, please remember that £2.2 million that was lost to this council.
Thank you. We have a proposer and a seconder. Are we all agreed to note this report? Thank you. Item 7, Independent Remuneration Panel, Members' Allowances Review. Item 7 on the agenda is Independent Remuneration Panel. I invite Marcia Eccleston to advise on the rules of the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Just to advise that the normal rules of debate apply now, and the councillor who declared an interest has now left the room so that the debate can continue in the normal way. That would be proposer, seconder and debate. 5 minutes is the normal time which the chair allows. And just to go a little bit further, I referenced earlier about dispensation, so if they apply, do let me know.
Thank you. May I just call for... Can I just take the voice?
Sorry, Councillor Woolley-Hoggins, did you have a point of order or just indicating to speak? Okay.
Sorry, thank you very much. I invite Councillor Gist to introduce this report to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. This is a recommendation to Council to make the changes to the Members' Allowance Scheme following a light touch review of the IRP. So I'll just draw members' attention to paragraph 1.4 of the report. It says that following the Council meeting, it transpired that there was no special responsibility allowance for the Chair of the Employment Committee due to the position previously being held by the Leader of the Council, and therefore a separate allowance was not required, and therefore to sort of regularise the position, as that's no longer the case. The IRP have suggested that the Chair of the Employment Committee should have their own SRA. So I'm happy to make this proposal.
Thank you. May I have a seconder for this report? Thank you, Councillor Henshaw Seraphin. Thank you. Are there any members now who wish to speak? Councillor Woolley-Hoggins.
Yes, we read this, or I read this, we've all read this, this proposal. And I bring to your attention the fact that on the 5th of February this year, the panel met for a total of 13 minutes. On the 26th of February, it met for a total of 50 minutes. On the 25th of June, this panel met for a total of 24 minutes, and on the 10th of September this panel was cancelled. That, in the last up to date, is 87 minutes worth of meeting, and it is impossible to justify the £3,582 worth of allowance that you wish to bestow upon the chair of this meeting. And it's precisely because these meetings are so short that the previous administration appointed or had either the chairman of the council or the deputy leader, the leader or the deputy leader as chairing that committee. So I don't think that this offers a good value for money. I think it's a waste of money, and it certainly isn't justified for this amount of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this? Councillor Harvey, followed by Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask a question of the sponsoring portfolio holder, please? On page 67 of the papers, there is reference to this, assuming it's passed, this allowance being paid from the 1st of April. Could the portfolio holder confirm to me or remind me of the date of the appointment of the current chairman, and could she confirm that this allowance will be paid from the date of appointment, not the date of 1st of April, when presumably the current post holder was not in post? Thank you.
Well, obviously I can look at that and check, but obviously he won't be paid an allowance for when he wasn't in post. That wouldn't be appropriate at all.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. There have been some discussions in this chamber earlier today about value for money. As I recall, it has been the custom and practice that the leader would also be chair of employment committee. So as far as I can see, and unless the portfolio holder can tell me different, the leader has chosen to divest herself of this responsibility, with the net impact that a separate special responsibility allowance must therefore be created, creating an additional SRA for another member of their group. That seems merely to be a consequence of a choice made by the leader. I've not seen anything that suggests there is any specific operational, legal or governance reason that committee chair should be separate. But if the portfolio holder has something that they can share with the chamber, I'd be keen to hear that, because my summation is that it's a choice that incurs a cost rather than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Alcock?
Thank you, Chair. Though I understand the point made about how short the meetings are, that's also partly because of how much work goes on prior to them, which is something that the Chair also does. Reading through the list of subcommittees, and of course I also sit on the JNCG committee as well, and matters relating to management team, disciplinary matters, all these above. This is we have the special allowance for the members who take on these additional roles because there's always additional work linked into it. Now, I resent paying £150 to have a tyre changed on my car, but it takes them 25 minutes to do it, yet it's not something I have the expertise to do, so you pay somebody. Sometimes you don't just pay for the time it takes, you pay for the years of experience that go with it. I am in support of a chair, of all chairs receiving special allowance, because of how much extra work goes into that role. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Rock?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, we seem to be in a position of doing our own analysis in competition with the independent remuneration panel, including very carefully done by the Leader of the Opposition in counting the number of minutes that the panel sat, assuming that no other work has gone on, which my colleague has alluded to. I rather think that's a dangerous thing to do. However, that's a matter for members. But what I would also point out, you'll notice I'm sitting here and not over there, but a year or two ago I was sitting over there and I was involved in the structure and the cabinet structure and the leader structure that we have now, which is different to how it was in the previous administration, which the comparison has been made. The leader of the council we have now has got different responsibilities then. For instance, she's got the climate change portfolio. We have fewer members of cabinet there has now, which results in a considerable saving over what was being proposed now. So I think it needs to be looked at in the round as how the responsibilities have been done and the remuneration that's carried on. Now, I wasn't proposing to say anything, but I think we're making a judgment in the round as to how we administer the council in the best possible way. I'm sure the opposition think they could do a better job. I'm sure they did. They thought they did before the election, and I'm sure they think that now. But I don't think, as a principle, we should tread very carefully before we say to the independent remuneration panel, the way you've looked at this, the work that you've done, we don't think you've done it the right way, and individual members think you've done it the wrong way. The remuneration is faulty. We want to be very careful how we enter that territory. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor?
Thank you, Councillor Frederick. Chairman, sorry. Chairperson. Chair. One of them anyway. There's a couple of points on. I'd just like some concerns about. Councillor Alcott mentioned lots of work behind the scenes, and that's true. As Chair of Voting and Scrutiny, I have discussions with the leader of the council, Mr. Perks, and various members of the council to talk about what we'll like to be discussing at Voting and Scrutiny Committee. But I try to be as open and transparent that any decisions made, what to bring forward on the agenda, are talked about and discussed. So I'm just wary that we don't make decisions behind the scenes that are not talked about in public and there's no public record. So I think it's important that we have to be open and transparent. So whilst I accept work goes on behind the scenes, as long as it doesn't preclude any debate and discussion of a subject that goes to that committee, that's my only slight concern about that. Just going back to Councillor Rock's point about the IRP and the work that they do in the independents, as it says on the tin, independent. But there have been many occasions recently where the work or the recommendations, the IRP, have not been recommended, have not been agreed for political reasons. So we have a precedent that, yes, the IRP does make recommendations, but they're not always agreed to due to various different reasons. So I think we've got to be open and transparent about that as well. So thank you.
Councillor Rolfe. Thank you. Councillor Littlewood. Point of order.
I'm sorry, Chair, but Councillor Alcock did not say discussions were happening in private. You've insinuated that it wasn't transparent and things were done behind closed doors. She never said that at all.
You have the right to reply,
No,
Councillor.
I was saying we have to be careful. I said decision. I'll rephrase what I said. I actually said that we have to be careful that we don't give the impression that decisions are not being taken behind the scenes and seem to be fair and open and transparent. Not the fact that lots of work goes on behind the scenes, but it wasn't particularly clear on what Councillor Alcott was saying. So I'm not saying that I'm implying any impropriety, but we have to be seen to making sure that any decisions are made in public and not behind the scenes. So that was my view. So I totally disagree with your point there, Councillor Rolfe.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Littlewood now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to go back to the comments made by Councillor Alcott about the requirement to do so much work behind the scenes. And I think we have to be a little bit careful what we're talking about here. I mean, the Remuneration Committee certainly agreed that any member of the Planning Committee being in quasi-judicial position needed to be recompensed for the additional hours and work that they would put in. But I would contend that if you were a member of OSC, if you were a member of the Audit and Standards Committee, you are duty-bound to do that extra work behind the scenes as well. So I think we've got to be very, very careful how we classify this. If we're not careful, everybody's going to be saying, I'm doing extra work, special work. We're councillors. We're here because we want to serve our community. It's not because of remuneration, because my goodness me, if it was remuneration, we would certainly not be here. So please, can we get this on a sensible plane? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Coucher. And Councillor Moore.
Chair, we're making a lot of this particular issue. I mean, this council is structured, as Councillor Rock has said, in a rather different way. What I would say is that, frankly, our staff in this authority is the most valuable asset that this body has. And clearly the Employment Committee is extremely important. The amount of work that's gone into producing a very satisfactory staff strategy, which we've actually produced and brought through, is a commendation to the work that that body has done. Coming forward with a few minutes of meetings in terms of saying that's the value of a particular post is, I think, disingenuous to say the least. In relation to it, I do think it's really important that we have strong leadership of our Employment Committee and that we build on, I think, the improving relationships that we as councillors have with our staff, which, as I say, is the most valuable asset that we have in this authority.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Fleming?
That's even better than that. Just very briefly, it's only a couple of sentences really. First observation is tyre fitters go through a lot of training before they fit tyres on your car. Is the chair trained in employment law? And the reason I make that comment is that's why the previous leader was the chair of that employment committee, because he was trained in the discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Shenton?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick things. Councillor Coucher mentions our staff in this authority is the most valuable asset we have, and I agree 100%. You won't hear me say that very often with Councillor Coucher, but I agree with that. However, he suggests that strong leadership of the Employment Committee is needed. Don't disagree with that. But Councillor Rock also says we need to be careful of entering into the territory of the independent panel. Words to that effect, and forgive me if I've not quite got that quite right, Councillor Rock. However, the role of members here is to challenge and question, regardless of who it is and which panel or which group. So to hear that we perhaps shouldn't question seems to go against what we stand for. So on that point, I'll sit down. Best speeches are always the shortest.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? If not, may I go to the recommendations? We have a proposer and a seconder. Are we agreed on the recommendations noted in this report? I think I'm advised we should do a vote, and it'll be a raised hand vote, not a... Yeah. Okay. Please may I ask for those people who are councillors who agree with the recommendations of this proposal. May I ask for those people, those councillors who oppose this recommendation? On the votes seen, that recommendation is carried. Thank you. Councillor Johnson is now coming back into the room. Right, we're on to 8 now, aren't we? Yeah. Thank you. We now move on to item 8 on the agenda. Minute 150, notice of motion, Civility and Respect Pledge. I invite Councillor Alcock to introduce this report as chair of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we would like, as you can see from the report here, to support the pledge for councils to sign the Civility and Respect Pledge. That goes to the Warwickshire Association of Local Councils. And what is quite important about this this whole motion here is we get to lead by example. And I think that is something that is very important. That as the district council, and being quite a large district as well, we lead through our parishes and our town councils that come under our umbrella, and we lead by example by signing this pledge. So I would like to recommend to council that the points on page 70, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for this? Thank you. Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah, Ostrander, that's right. Okay. Are there any members who wish to speak on this item? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say, I think it would have been helpful if with the paper a copy of the pledge had actually been circulated. I know it's available if you go digging, but it would have been helpful and would have saved people time. My point of concern is that I put myself in the position of a parish council chairman being propositioned with shall my council sign this or shall it not? And the first requirement of the pledge is that the council, the relevant council, has put in place a training programme for councillors and staff. I don't see parish councils up and down the district going to be in the position of organising a training programme. So my question is, how will this need be met, please?
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Juned?
Yes, I moved this notice of motion originally, and I did so after speaking to WALC, the Warwickshire Association of Local Councils. The National Association of Local Councils originally moved this and wanted wanted support. They do provide training and support to parish councils, but they wanted to make sure that the district council was supportive of them and what they wanted to do. So I was very happy to move the motion as a result. That we are, as a council, committed to working in partnership with our parish councils to do and help them with whatever they want, but particularly WALC wanted our support. And it says in here that the District Council will support refresher training on respect, civility and the Code of Conduct. And we will help WALC with that as well.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to comment on this motion? Thank you very much. As we have a proposer and a seconder, may I ask for support to note this report? Are we agreed? Yes. Thank you. So we move on to item 8, minute 150. Sorry. I didn't turn the page over. I turned it back to front instead. Okay, item 9, minute 182, annual work programme. Item 9 on the agenda from Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 30th of August 2024 regarding the annual work programme. I invite Councillor Crump to introduce this report as chair of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. I'll get it right this time. I'll be very brief. Just there's 2 recommendations that full council notes that the progress on the 2024 Overview Scrutiny Work Programme be noted, and also the need to ensure that members of the consent council consult parish and town councils, again as part of the communication strategy, within their wards to gather topics for the 2025 overview and scrutiny work programme. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask for a seconder? Councillor Roll.
Second that.
Thank you. Are there any members who wish to speak on this item? In that case, may I ask, as we have a proposer and a seconder, may we agree the recommendations noted in this report? Thank you. Item 10, constitutional review. Item 10 on the agenda is minute 229 from the Audit and Standards Committee meeting held on the 23rd of September 2024 regarding the constitutional review. I invite Councillor Alcock to introduce this report as chair of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, again, this is work that was done with the Audit and Standards Committee. We had the consultation and with help from the monitoring and officer as well. And the committee's done the work. They've gone through what needed to be changed. I would like to recommend, please, at Council, that the changes to the Council's constitution, as detailed in Appendix 1 to 10 of the report, be approved, and that the changes to the Leader's statement in Appendix 11, as approved by the Leader, also be noted. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a seconder for this proposal? Thank you, Councillor Rolfe. Does any member wish to make a comment? Councillor Crump.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, again, me, I'm afraid. Yeah, just very briefly. I've got some slight concerns. I would just ask for a deferral on this item. It relates to the call-in on OSC that we haven't particularly discussed at OSC. I've spoken to briefly to the Chair of Audit and Standards. I've spoken to the Monitoring Officer and Mr. Buckland and raised some slight concerns. We've got some slight concerns about the reduction of the ability to call in at OSC. So I'd just like a slight deferral on this until we can have a more in-depth discussion. So apart from everything else, I'll be supporting that, but it's just the deferral regarding, so we can discuss the OSC and the calling. Thank you.
May I call on the monitoring officer, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Crump. I'm grateful for your representations. Obviously, this is a political decision today, but I'm asked just to comment on where we find ourselves. So we have a recommendation to Council from Audit and Standards, properly considered by Audit and Standards. And so the decision for full Council today is to accept it or not to accept it in its entirety as it reads. So any political decisions as to whether or not that is a consideration has to be for the politicians to debate and hear today.
Councillor Hawley-Hogan. Sorry. Yes.
The Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I think, and the chairmanship of that was one of the triumphs of the Lib Dem when the Lib Dems came into power. That you stood by what you'd said and that you were going to make the chairmanship of this as a member of the opposition. I think it's entirely reasonable that this matter has been raised. I know that it's been, I know that Andy's worked quite hard, Councillor Crump's worked quite hard to try to convey this, and there are concerns just about this calling. Now, calling happens under these circumstances very rarely, and I think it's right that we give this proper consideration. This is not undermining anything that you do at all, but Overview and Scrutiny Committee really, I like to think, is the non-political side of this council. It's when we really discuss and get to the heart of things. And I know that I'm looking at you, Councillor Alcock, because we're often on the same page with many things that are discussed there. And I ask that we tread carefully with this and that we heed what's being asked of us. Now, it is only one small part of these proposals that Councillor Crump, the chair of this committee, is proposing that needs further refinement, and I think that careful consideration of this needs to be done, and I'm grateful that he's brought this up, and I do believe that that this really does matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. May I call on Councillor Gist?
It was my understanding that this amendment is merely to clarify the position that there can't be a call-in if hasn't been an executive decision made. That was my understanding of what I've read. Just thought that'd be
Thank
helpful.
you. Councillor Shenton.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I support the idea that we should defer this, purely because I don't think anybody would ever accuse the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee showing any bias of any kind, as any chairman should do it on our committees. But it's right that when the chairman raises a point that even we at Audit and Standards missed, perhaps, that it's listened to, and so I would suggest that if we can, we bring this paper back to the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. May I call on Councillor Rock?
It's probably in the nature of a point of order, Chair. As I understand it, and in fact I've had a word with the monitoring officer about other matters in here, but the revisions of the Constitution have been debated at length at Audit and Standards. And I think before we can review the decision for this council, for the recommendations of Audit and Standards, I'm not understanding what the reservations are that are being expressed here. It would appear that the chairman of scrutiny believes the changes are going to interfere with the operation somehow of the scrutiny committee, which appears not to be the intent of the changes. So I know he's already spoken, but if he's suggesting that intent has not been met, I think I for one would like to hear, I mean, I wasn't at Audit and Standards, I'd like to hear what the reservations are, because I'm not understanding at the moment what the concern is. So I think we ought to know what those concerns are. It sounds like there is a concern that it interferes somehow with the work of Audit and Standards, of scrutiny.
With Chair's consent, I can relay the conversation had earlier today with Councillor Crump. It relates specifically to the circumstances that calling can be allowed, and the change which is being discussed is that if an item had been discussed at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee prior to the Cabinet meeting, then that particular decision can then not be called in of the Cabinet because it's already been discussed once at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That previously didn't exist as stands within the Constitution.
After due consideration of that explanation, does anybody else wish to contribute comments? I can allow Councillor Crump to answer that point to clarify. Thank you.
Just very briefly, we are concerned that because of the change in the policy, that we might not discuss something at Overview and Scrutiny Committee for fear that we wouldn't be able to call it in. We know there's a possibility that there's some minor changes that weren't as part of the policy. All right, Mr. Buckland, am I saying the right things there? I think Mr. Buckland's confirmed this. We are right that if it went from Overview and Scrutiny Committee with some comments and recommendations, and then it went to Cabinet, which then totally changed the original purpose of the paper, we could still call that in. Is that correct? But we are concerned that we might think, well, we're not sure about this. We want some further time because sometimes things come very late to Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We have papers quite late, and that is no criticism of officers due to the amount of work. And therefore, sometimes we not necessarily have the time to scrutinise those papers properly. And if we haven't done that properly and haven't done a proper report back onto the Cabinet, which is the next working day, and it means we have to do additional work over the weekend that Howard and I usually do, it is quite difficult. So therefore, we might have missed something at scrutiny that, because of the shortage of time and the time between Overview and Scrutiny and full Cabinet, therefore we want some safeguard that we could potentially call that in because we've not had time to do it properly. So that's my only safeguard only. We've had very little call-ins. I can't remember how many call-ins we've had over the last 18 months. Is that none?
Thank
Sorry,
you.
sorry.
Is
So
there-
it's just a safeguard. I'm just slightly uneasy about this. I'm raising these points, and obviously it's a political decision that the Lib Dem groups have got the majority, so if they want to vote it through anyway. But I think I'll be remiss in my role as chair of overview and scrutiny if I didn't raise them, because it's no good saying, well, I meant to say these things, but I didn't get up and say them. So thank you for that, Madam Chair.
Councillor, may I call on the Monitoring Office to give some clarification here? Before I call Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again to Councillor Crump. I've heard all the other representations from yourselves as councillors here. If I could just talk about a little bit about the process that takes place when a review like this happens. The monitoring officer can't make a decision on this on their own. It has to be a political decision. And therefore, the Constitution sets down that needs to go through a set process of consultation and also through Audit and Standards Committee. That process was duly followed at the time. And what I would say is that currently in the Constitution, it already references that certain items can't be called in if they've gone through a certain process. I'm not going to read the whole of it through, but it does say, and I'm just going to refer to one part, where the Cabinet refers a matter on to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, so that it's heard before they've made their decision. Basically, it can't be the subject of calling in that scenario. So I'm just using that as an example. It already exists in the Constitution. The amendment that we were seeking, and I say we, I mean yourselves as councillors, were seeking was an amendment to clarify the wording as Councillor Gist has explained, not to add something new around the general principle of calling, because it already existed in the Constitution, and the remit in which we could then say that you couldn't call an item in already existed in the Constitution as well. But going back to the key point, it's for yourselves as politicians, having heard the representations from Councillor Crump and anyone else that will speak, as to what you decide, whether to adopt the recommendation as it is or not.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Pemberton, please?
Thank you for announcing me, Councillor Shenton. Thank you, Chair. I hear what Councillor Rock talks about in terms of through audit and standards. I think what Councillor Crump, as Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, is concerned is around the law of unintended consequences. And this administration has put in place a mechanism whereby the opposition scrutinises, and that reinforces scrutiny. And so scrutiny is important, and I think if you have a chair of scrutiny who has a concern that there might be an unintended consequence about the effectiveness of calling, there is no reason for us not just to pause, because I'm not aware of anything in the remainder of the recommendations that is so mission critical that we must decide upon it now. And I think that it behoves all of us to be able to ensure that we have the best opportunity for scrutiny of decision making to get the best decisions regardless of administration. And so perhaps inviting the chair of the Audit and Standards Committee, Councillor Alcock, if the only mechanism to get past this is to withdraw the item, to bring it back to the next council meeting to afford the opportunity, because overview and scrutiny will see it through a different lens. So I'm not sure whether that's perhaps a way forward, and perhaps the monitor officer could help members. There is a concern expressed. There seems to be no downside in exploring that from the lens of OSC, and in the, again, going right back to the very beginning of this afternoon and cooperation and the sun and the moon and the stars, perhaps we should be thinking about just, there were no stars. Nobody ever invites the stars.
I have no doubt.
So, whether that
Don't have conversation during the debate.
Indeed, Chair, apologies. But perhaps inviting the proposer to withdraw the item might then afford an opportunity. And overview and scrutiny is all members, all political parties are represented. We just want to make sure we get that right, and I see no downside to what is being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rock. Point of order.
This is a point of order because I asked a question before and I'm still not clear about the answer. I for one, will be uncomfortable with forcing something through on the vote in this matter. But we've been told this doesn't change the process at all. The object of this was not to change, it was to change some wording. Now, I want to be clear, if that's the case, I can't understand what the problem is. And also, there's been said there's no downside to this. There's loads of other changes in this, loads and loads of other changes, so there is a downside to it. And can I ask the monitor officer, am I not correct in thinking at the next council meeting, we have a programme which will introduce other changes in sweeping up other things in the Constitution? So if we've got to do some rewording next time, we can do it next time, because she and I have spoken about other things in the Constitution that relates to other committees. So those are a couple of questions that I'd like to ask, please, because we could pass this, and then if there's a problem, we could change it next time round.
Yes. I call on the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the point of order issue, and the question raised about whether or not the Constitution would be reviewed again, well, the answer is yes. Whether it's at the next council meeting is probably not something I can say, because obviously it has to go through a process, but absolutely, there is always a constant review, and in fact, within the Constitution, there's a requirement on me to review it regularly.
Thank you. Having had a very full debate, Councillor Cole, sorry, I've got you on my list. Councillor Cole.
Oh, thank you, Chair. If this simply is a matter of providing clarity, then I think we'd better get the clarity in as soon as possible. We don't appear to be, I will defer to my learned friends. If this is not a matter of changing process, then there is no need for angst, and you can take it for discussion in ONS and bring your recommendations back as part of the general review of the Constitution. But as this, as I understand it, is a vote on simply providing clarity in the wording, but not changing the process, I don't think there's a need to defer it at the moment. Thank you.
Again, just a point of order, please, because
another one. Thank you.
Overview and scrutiny don't review. Sorry, Chair. I was just waiting to get permission to stand. Overview and scrutiny don't review the Constitution. It is audit and standards review the Constitution. We are saying about the impact on the effectiveness of calling and overview and scrutiny. So it's that's just the clarity there. So, okay.
Councillor Cole.
Sorry, I should provide clarity to what I was saying before. I'm not asking you to rewrite the Constitution, but as over review and scrutiny, you'd be scrutinising the bits that you wanted to defer to discuss in overview and scrutiny. But as we're providing clarity, that doesn't stop you doing your discussions.
We don't have conversation. We're going beyond the rules of debate here. Thank you. We've had a considerable debate. People are asking to speak twice or three times and they're getting through on points of order. I think we've got to a point now where we need to make a decision. If I have...
I do apologise, Chair. I wouldn't. More of a point of... It is a point of order, I suppose. It's a Thank you, Chair. Very much. I have heard what's been said, and thank you, Councillor Crump, for bringing it to me just before the meeting started. It has given me a bit of an opportunity to go through some things myself, and that does help. The process that we went through with the changes that we have implemented in the Constitution was actually to invite members to come into the pre-training, of which a member of your party was present at. That was then, we went through some of the changes. Some we accepted, some we didn't. Before it ever came to orders and standards to be debated. Now, if there had been concerns like this, that possibly would have been the time to either have it raised at audit and standards before we went through the rest of the work to bring it to full council, rather than to bring it to full council. So it is a case of, I don't support on the deferring of it, and as Chair of Audit, we've done the work, we had the debate, so it will be going through with the clarification, I think, that has been given by the monitoring officer, that is not going to change the due process. I hear what you say, but however, due process was taken when it came to this point, and nothing was raised in the debate at audit and standards. And due to that, I will ask the council to vote on it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right, we'll now go to we've had a proposer, a seconder, and we'll now go to the vote. I believe we need to have a vote on this matter. So may I ask you to raise your hands if you approve of the recommendations stated here?
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and those against.
Right, may I now ask for those against this recommendation? Thank you. And may I have any abstentions? Thank you. It's carried. Thank you very much for the... Just checking this one. We're now on to item 11, preparing for the introduction of the Procurement Act 2023. The agenda, minute 230 from the Audit and Standards Committee meeting held on the 23rd of September 2024 regarding the constitutional review. I invite Councillor Alcock to introduce this report as chair of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. As you can see, what is being okay, I can't talk anymore. This is due to come into force on 24th of February 2025. The review and the contract standing orders have been undertaken and a new set of standing orders produced and were recommended for approval. So the recommendations are there. One that we can recommend to Council, the report be noted. Subject to recommendation, the new contract standing orders at Appendix 1 be adopted with effect from the 24th of February and the Constitution amended accordingly, and that the monitoring officer be given delegated authority to make changes to the new contract standing orders to affect any additional revised statutory guidance published prior to 24 February 2025. Thank you, members.
May I ask for a seconder for this? Thank you. Councillor Rolfe. Are there any members who wish to make comments at this point? No? Thank you very much. In that case, we have a proposer and a seconder. May we note this report? Are we all agreed to note this report? Thank you. Item number 12. Item 12 on the agenda is minute 257 from the Cabinet meeting held on the 7th of October 2024 regarding tackling food insecurity and promoting food justice. I invite Councillor Cole to introduce this item. Oh, sorry. May I correct that? May I call on Councillor Juned to introduce this item?
First of all, I'd like to start by saying this is a notice of motion we ought never to have had. But I'd like to thank Councillors Pertigella and Petrovic for introducing this notice of motion to this council. And I hope you will all agree that it's produced and the reports that have been produced have been helpful and supportive. It's a fact that Stratford Food Bank, the annual number of the handouts from the Stratford Food Bank have gone up from 3,141 in 2017 to 18 to 9,002 in 23-24. Some of the rise was due to COVID-19, the cost of living crisis, and all that has happened since that time. But what I find the saddest is that the rise in demand that has risen across the district has been the rise in food parcels to children, rising by 50%. The funding support from this district was provided in 23-24 and 24-25 to buy food stocks for the food banks. And this will be a bid that I would be supportive of in the next budget to continue. We work closely with the Social Inclusion Partnership to support going forward on this, because it's one of the things that we need to, all of us need to show our leadership on. It is not good enough in this day and age that we get people and children unable to be fed, not just sensibly, but fed sufficiently. We need to be able to align and develop the partnership, promoting food justice locally, embed it in our local plan policies, including the emerging South Warwickshire local plan, in licensing policies, but working with our growing opportunities plan and our social inclusion partnership. So I'm opening this debate to really just to say, I do hope that everybody, and I mean everybody, supports the idea that we should make sure what the Trussell Trust wants. The Trussell Trust wants eventually that there should be no need for food banks at all. But meanwhile, we have a situation where children are in need. And I do hope that this is taken forward, not only through the District Council, but nationally to Parliament about addressing this as an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call upon a seconder? Councillor Pertigella, thank you. You wish to speak now?
I want to reserve my right to speak at the end, but I also want to declare that I have volunteered for community kitchens and also I donate to the food bank. Thank you.
Do I have any speakers, people who wish to speak? Alcock, Rolfe, Pertigella, and Petrick, yeah, and Harvey. Just capturing the names before we carry on. Okay.
I'm sorry, mine is declaration of interest, Chair.
So is mine, Chair.
Mine.
Oh. So we have 3 declarations of interest because?
Because as Mayor, I do part of my fundraising went to the food bank.
Councillor Alcock.
Thank you. I also participate in organising drives for the food bank in my ward of Bishopton.
Also declaring interest, but I would also like to speak.
Okay.
Same declaration.
And Councillor Harvey. I wish to speak. Yeah. Councillor Grocott. What, you wish to speak?
No, I wish to declare that I work with the community kitchen.
Thank you. So we have Councillor Wally Hoggins wishes to speak. Yeah, yeah. So Harvey and. Pertigella, Petrovic, Harvey, Wally Hoggins. Thank you very much. Please may I call on Councillor Petrovic to start.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the officers for their hard work on this excellent report. As a seconder to this original motion, I am delighted that the Cabinet is recommending its adoption, and I fully support this motion as a vital step toward tackling the important issue of food insecurity in our district. We have heard a lot from the opposition in today and previous meetings about what are we doing to support our most vulnerable residents. Well, this initiative is a great example of the ways we're working towards creating a more fair and just communities. In my ward, Clopton, I've seen firsthand the power of local action for the success of our community kitchen, which has been run in collaboration with several community organisations. And it's not really just been about providing meals, it's about bringing people together, building community, as well as tackling climate change by reducing food waste. In the last 12 months, the kitchen has served over 1,100 meals and saving more than 2,000 kilograms of food, which is an amazing achievement. But what is even more important is that as valuable as these local efforts are, we cannot lose the sight of the fact that food insecurity is also a national issue, particularly with the rising cost of living and the food inflation, and one that requires a strong coordinated response from the government. One aspect of this Right to Food campaign that I would particularly like to focus on is the importance of free school meals. The report highlights that over 21% of children in our district are living in poverty. That's thousands of children who are potentially going hungry. So education and health are being compromised because their families simply cannot afford to provide the nutritious meals they need. Ensuring that every child has access to a free school meal is absolutely critical, and I strongly believe that we must include our commitment to lobby the national government on this issue. And I'm proud that our MP has spoken in favour of that before as well. We know there's a growing body of evidence that shows how important school meals are, not only in ensuring that children get at least one healthy, balanced meal each day, but also improving their ability to learn and participate fully. When children go hungry, their focus suffers, their behaviour can deteriorate, and their long-term consequences in terms of academic achievement, social and physical. So it is important that we include free school meals as a key part of this motion in tackling food insecurity in our district and recognising this can't only be solved at the local level. This is why I believe it's crucial for us to lobby the national government to extend the provision of free school meals to all children, regardless of household income. And finally, we must also push the government to ensure that benefits and wages reflect the true cost of living. And many families who rely on school meals are also those who struggle to make ends meet on low wages and inadequate benefits. So by addressing this, both the immediate need for food provision, emergency food provision in our district, but also taking this more coordinated approach by working with other agencies, we can make a real lasting progress in building a fairer, healthier and more resilient food system for everyone in our district, and I urge everyone to vote in favour of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Please may I call on Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm generally in support of the Cabinet's recommendations before us. There is, however, one of the 5 recommendations I cannot support, and that's the recommendation number 3. This calls on the Council to support the Right to Food campaign's stated demand that free school meals should be provided for every child. Currently, free school meals, currently free school meals are provided to 2 groups of children: those entitled to free school meals by virtue of their family's financial circumstances, and those entitled as a right to free school meals because they're either in a reception class or they're in years 1 or 2 in primary schools. Taken together, this means that 8.4 million children in English state schools, 3.4 million are eligible for free meals. The cost of this provision is calculated by the Institute for Fiscal Studies to be £1.4 billion a year. The government funds this provision at so much per free meal, currently £2.41 per meal. This funding has not kept pace with CPI inflation. If it had, the funding level would now be £2.87 per meal, an increase of 16%. If this shortfall were to be made good, it would cost the Treasury another £250 a year. The current after-tax annual family income level that qualifies a child for free school meals is £7,400. If this limit were to be raised to £20,000, about another 900,000 children would become eligible for free school meals. This would cost another £425 million. This council is being asked, on the other hand, to declare its support for a policy providing free school meals to every child in school. The IFS calculates that if all primary and secondary school children up to the age of 16 were provided with free school meals, this would cost the Treasury an extra £2.5 billion a year. To say the Treasury doesn't currently have any spare tax revenue is an understatement. The money the government has already earmarked in this area, and that is £315 million, is to finance the introduction of breakfast clubs in primary schools. As things stand, the cost of universal provision of free school meals would therefore have to be found from within the existing education budget. As a consequence, meals would also be provided free to those families on average and higher incomes whose food needs are already met by their parents. A universal policy would mean that all school children would inevitably pay the price because it would necessitate the reallocation of £2.5 billion of the education budget away from the classroom to meeting the cost of free meals in the dining hall. A more targeted and more effective way to spend £2.5 billion, if it was available, would be to address the child poverty itself by removing the two-child cap that currently prevents parents from claiming universal credit or child tax credit for a third child and at similar cost. So, Chair, I cannot support the recommendation number 3 because it's not affordable in current or foreseeable circumstances and it can't be delivered. It would be a misallocation of resources in providing free meals to many children whose parents can and already do afford to feed them. It would deprive schools of resources to deliver their prime education function and thereby damage children's prospects. And perhaps most importantly, because in the real political world of making choices between competing ends and limited resources, there are more effective ways to alleviate poverty amongst children than allocating an extra £2.5 billion to the universal provision of free school meals. To accept this recommendation, in my view, would be irresponsible. It defies the facts. It would be to no effect other than to grandstand. It would damage
30 seconds, Councillor.
It would damage the council's credibility, and it would deprive the deserving residents of this district of the possibility of more effective delivery of support in other ways to tackling food poverty. I therefore ask members not to accept recommendation number 3. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wally-Hoggins.
I know it's difficult to perceive the fact that I am now in my middle 50s, but 20 years ago I was actually in a working very hard in an inner city school in Coventry, and within that school there was a rollout programme for free school meals and for breakfast club. The breakfast club wasn't funded by the school, it was actually funded by Kellogg's, the cornflake people. And I need you all to know today, because I fully endorse all of these proposals before us, and I thank my esteemed colleagues over the way for bringing this to our attention today. What actually it means to parents and to children, knowing that they can come to school and have a breakfast, is huge. The difference it makes to behaviour in schools, to academic achievement, even, I was only a primary school teacher, even our most youngest children. What also free school meals and breakfasts do is that they ensure that there is no disparity between pupils realising who's having free school meals and who isn't. And actually that's really, really important. We talk much of the government funding this, but actually from the research that I've seen, or from I know it's a long time ago, but there are companies out there who are willing to help and are willing to provide, like, for example, fruit in classrooms. My God, what a revelation that was. You know, I don't want the banana today, miss, I want the pear. So yeah, it just goes on and on. We have to vote for this because we know that it is the right thing to do. I, for one, am not going to make anything easier for this government at all when it comes to managing their finances. They firmly and surely put our money where their mouth is and some of our most vulnerable. But it is our children's futures that are at stake with food. And I am desperately sorry that we are in a position where this just seems to be getting worse and worse. Children need to know that school is a safe place. They need to know that they can come to school, have a breakfast, have a lunch, and if they need to, stay for after-school club, that they will also be fed at after-school club. And for many children, they're actually not, we want them to be nutritionally balanced, but actually for many parents, that takes away the anguish of not being able to feed our children, because actually today they might want to put their central heating on and they may not be able to make that decision about putting their heating on and feeding their children. And I can tell you that the dread for many parents from my previous experience is when social services visit a family, they are loved, they are clean, but social services will open the cupboards. Is there food in that cupboard to sustain those children? And it is a terrible, terrible fear that those cupboards will be empty and those much-loved children will be taken from those parents. So, everybody, this is happening. This is happening in our district. We know better. We know what needs to be done. And these proposals in front of us today, I think, need to be applauded. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart and from the children that I taught 20 years ago, and this made a massive difference. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Hatch?
To welcome this motion and agree with everything Councillor Worley-Hoggins has said. I just want to sort of horseshoe in an extra consideration into this motion, that a bit on food, education, where food comes from, local food, and I hope that this isn't forgotten in when we are considering all these motions, or all the 5 recommendations. With school meals, for instance, as well as getting something to eat, it can be an education in where food comes from, instill healthy eating habits. And in there was mention in the original motion about local food action plan and opportunities for food growing in the district. So I'd just like to bring it a bit wider, and when considering those things, of course, we need links with farmers, and there was some contact with local farmers at the recent Climate Assembly, and I hope they are taken forward, and so that increasing local fresh food doesn't get forgotten within this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Coles?
Thank you, Chair. I too worked in the education system until quite recently, because you may be surprised. I've just retired. I'm sure it will come as a shock to you looking at my flowing golden tresses. I worked for over 10 years, most recently as a school business manager, and I spent most of that decade making every single penny squeak at the school. And it got harder and harder. But one of the things I noticed as I went through the years was how the bar slid on free school meals and who was eligible. And my concern, actually, although for the children who were in receipt of free school meals, was actually the band who should have been in the free school meals and who weren't, because that bar was lowered all the time, because the eligibility for free school meals was taken away and taken away and taken away and taken away. For a school, one of the things that comes with the free school meals is the pupil premium, and that was put in place to address the inequality caused by poverty to children in the educational system. It provided additional funds to schools to help those who were falling behind. I have absolutely nothing against the motion. I'm fully in support of it. I think the report that came with it was enormously detailed and enormously worrying. And I would just like to say that when we look at the numbers of how we do this, it is fortunately not our problem. We'll chuck that one to the government. I'm sure they'll sort it out. But there are many, many, many things that go hand in hand with this that will not only feed these children, but will support their education and improve the quality of their life, but also improve the quality of their future. And I think we really need to keep that in mind. And I do hope that everybody will vote in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Adams?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to raise some points in response to Councillor Harvey's speech. I think I'd say I appreciate that there is a cost to the implication of providing free school meals for all. But I see it more as an investment in our children. There are certainly those in poverty who it's invisible, the poverty that they experience, and they do fall through the cracks. But we also know that the impact of poverty can have impacts on their physical, mental, and behavioural health, all of which do draw from the Treasury in terms of how we have to redress issues within our society. And we have to look at the bigger picture of how that money is seen as an investment in making sure that children are supported so that they can have better social and economic opportunities, and that it's through measures like this, which don't discriminate in any sense, we can see that investment come to be a true benefit for people, for their futures, and raise people out of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Pertigella?
Thank you, Chair. I thank the Cabinet for recommending the motion for approval. A similar motion was submitted nearly 3 years ago, and the then Conservative administration rejected it, so it's excellent news to see cross-party support for the motion today. We have several food banks in the district which feed an increasing number of our residents, including many children. In our local area, the Trussell Trust Network food banks, which include Stratford-on-Avon, Foss and Arden food banks, have seen an increase in food parcels. There are other local food banks, like the Shipston Food Bank and food share initiatives, which were formed during the first lockdown, and they're still operating 4 years on. So the actual number of residents that cannot afford or access healthy or nutritional food could be even higher. We need to also understand that food banks are the last resort. When residents reach the food bank, they would have already skipped meals. Food inflation reached a 45-year high and 19.1% in April 2023. And increasing food costs now overshadow energy prices as the primary contributor to the cost of living crisis. On top of this, we know from the state of the district that many more households are living in fuel poverty. The motion asks for a coordinated collaborative approach with Warwickshire County Council, which is already implementing an excellent food strategy. The proposed multi-agency approach will see Stratford District Council contributing towards improving the health and well-being of our residents, including our children and young people, as well as our older residents. I welcome the Council recommendation to encourage potential sites for food growing by supporting allotments and community orchard provisions, and helping with finding and accessing spaces for community food growing. And that food justice and security, for example, in relation to best agricultural land, will be embedded in both the South Warwickshire Local Plan and the work of the Climate Change Panel. Most importantly, the recommendations call for greater emphasis on food insecurity in the Growing Opportunities Plan. This is something that should consider strategies and work by other tiers of government, including parish and town councils and other stakeholders, such as food banks, community groups, and our local food producers. And to this regard, I want to thank volunteers and coordinators of food banks, community fridges and pantries, and community kitchens. It's heartening to hear about the support for the Right to Food campaign, and I look forward to working with you locally and in Parliament on making the access to affordable and healthy food for our residents a legal right. Pilots for universal free school meals in junior schools have shown excellent benefits in terms of behaviour and educational attainment, although I agree with Councillor Harvey that taking away the two-child cap would be the easiest way to lift children out of poverty. We should lead on local food poverty plan in the areas which the district council has authority, and our responsibility is also to those families who need help right now. For the most vulnerable in our towns, our villages, our hamlets. We can use the planning policies to shape local areas, for example, to support and encourage community food growing, the creation of food cooperatives, as well as limit the spread of unhealthy fast food outlets. We could provide safe, truly affordable housing opportunities for individuals and households who may be vulnerable to food insecurity. The benefits to the health and well-being of our residents will be empowering and positively life-changing. I trust that all members here today will be able to support this important motion. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Juned to sum up?
Can I thank you for all the input that has gone on into this debate. It has been heartwarming to hear so many people that have been in support of this. The Cabinet did have quite a lot of backgrounding, and I just want to kind of feedback to Councillor Hatch that on pages 10, 11 and 12 of the Cabinet report, there was talk about what the District Council could do for things like supporting things like allotments, support for agriculture in the South Warwickshire Local Plan, community orchards, etc. And that is within our power. What is within our power, we will try to do. One of the things that we are able to do is to support organisations like HRI up at Wellesbourne, that's the Horticulture Research Institute, which actually has a gene bank. Because one of the things we forget at our peril sometimes is that climate change is going to impact on our food sources and the diversity of some of our crops. If some of the crops can fall foul of disease or climate change, we are going to find that not only globally, but also in this country, we will have problems. So thank goodness that we've got that kind of facility and that kind of research going on in our area, and we need to encourage that. That was originally my area in my master's and PhD, was looking at preventing that kind of thing happening to our crops by recognising that the genetic resources were there, and thank goodness we've got that kind of resource in our area. So thank you very much for all the debate. It takes me back to when I was a child and I had free school meals. So thank you for your support on this issue.
Thank you. We have a proposer and a seconder, and each of these recommendations will now be considered individually. So I'll read out first recommendation 1. Will all those in favour raise their hands for recommendation 1? Thank you. Recommendation 2, will you raise your hands if you approve of recommendation 2?
Unanimous again, Chair.
Thank you. Now, can you raise your hands, all those in favour of recommendation 3?
And those against?
And those against recommendation 3? Thank you. Recommendation 4, will you raise your hands if you're in favour of recommendation 4?
Again, unanimous.
Thank you. And now can we raise hands in recommendation 5? That's it, isn't it? It's just 5 recommendations. Thank you very much for that. May I say now we will have a 15-minute break. Agreed. The recommendations are noted in the report are approved. And now we have a break of 15 minutes, so can we be back in the chamber at 25 to 4? 25 to, gosh, 25 to 5. Gosh. Councillors, 2 minutes to return to your seats, please. Councillors, it's time to actually resume the council meeting at 25 to 5. So may we move to item 14 on the agenda, which is questions to the leader. There have been questions to council. Councillor questions. Right. So I just do, to make it very clear, we just started. Thank you. I like to do that 3 times in a meeting. So on 13 councillor questions, there have been 3 questions, and may I ask Councillor Harvey if he has a supplementary?
I do, Chairman. I wonder if Councillor Croucher would accept my apology for posing this question, which caused him to have to spend time writing out 12 lines of reply. The word yes would have done very nicely. Thank you.
I don't think that was a question, but thank you for the response, Councillor Harvey. The next question is from Councillor Hatch. Do you have a supplementary? Can you turn your speaker on, please?
Thank you for your reply, and obviously we're looking forward to the future home standards being brought in, which should have been brought in 10 years ago. It's just for consideration that with all the houses that we're going to be built, that even with the future home standards, there's at the moment nothing to ensure shoddy building work doesn't happen. And we know that there are a lot of houses in the district that have hotspots and improper insulation because of developers not building quality houses. And it's with all the houses that are going to be built, can we consider some way of dealing with bad quality housing in the district?
Councillor Coucher.
Can I say thank you very much for this? I think we're all very concerned about retrofitting, how difficult that is, but how important it is, frankly, if we're going to move to a more carbon neutral situation. Yes, there's been a lot of press reports, clearly, about poor standards, and I think that's something that we would like to be more interventionist. I just wish that our building control department were empowered to take a more authoritative view in relation to these matters. I think it was highly well, highly destructive, frankly, when the ability was given, particularly to house builders, basically to mark their own homework, and I think many of our problems result from that. The future home standard, I think, frankly, we should be building every single house to that standard at this point in time, and it's absolutely crazy that we are still building houses which will need to be retrofitted in the future. That is not good policy at all. I do hope that this government is going to address that.
Thank you. Councillor Passingham, do you have a supplementary question, please?
Yes, well, once again, thank you, Councillor Coucher, for the very useful explanation of various clauses in council procedures and policies. I was encouraged to note that you're in support of the embedded principle of 20-minute neighbourhoods. So I'm presuming this means, in effect, eco-villages and eco-towns, because I can't see how you can attach a 20-minute neighbourhood to somewhere like Shipston or the villages around Shipston, some of the larger villages, because there's just not the infrastructure, and it's a long way to travel. Hopefully it will be these eco-towns and eco-villages which are on sustainable transport corridors, which was a policy which seems to have been slightly dropped or overlooked, where there are good train and bus services to wherever these 20-minute neighbourhoods are built.
Councillor Coucher.
Once again, thank you very much indeed for this question. I think sustainable transport is one of our most important things moving forward, and I know in our consideration for the South Warwickshire local plan how we've been making sure that we're not necessarily re-adopting the dispersal strategy which we've had in the past of little bits of development all round in every single village, but we will be looking at more sustainable development for the future. And I know access to transport is key. One of the key issues we've been looking at clearly is rail routes and rail capacity, which I think is going to be absolutely crucial. But also obviously the importance of sustainable bus travel as well, which is also extremely important going forward.
Thank you. We now move on to item 14 on the agenda, questions to the leader. If you'd like to put your hand up if you have a question for the leader now, and the Chief Executive will write down names. Right. While that's happening, note that up to 30 minutes will be allowed for questions, with each councillor permitted to speak for no more than 3 minutes and may ask no more than 2 questions. Due to the time constraint, please keep your questions concise. Please note for the duration of this item, I'll be taking the order of questions sequentially by political balance. Okay. Does anyone have questions for the leader? Yeah. Right. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. With the government's new devolution deal, there are growing concerns about proposals that appear to centralise rather than devolve power to local communities. In particular, I'm thinking of the transfer of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund allocation from the District Council to the County Council. Could the leader clarify what steps have been taken to advocate for the interests of district councils in these proposals to ensure that our voice is represented?
Yes, I can. All the chief executives and the leaders of all the district and borough councils of Warwickshire all had a meeting and all agreed to draft a letter to the minister drawing our concerns. The major concern was the things like the UK SPF, which is due to, we're not certain what the government's intention is for the long-term allocation of that fund. But at the moment, it is to come upwards to Warwickshire County Council, so that Warwickshire County Council will be in charge of that allocation. We have made it clear that that is one of the concerns that we have. I certainly have a concern that we are able at the moment to be able to take into account our particular local concerns, our local businesses, our local knowledge of our communities, to be able to allocate that to our communities in a very sensible and very hands-on way to our local people, knowing our communities. We have that concern, so we have raised that. I also took part in the District Council Networks and the UK an LGA webinar and discussion where those very similar questions were raised. So those questions have been sent to the Minister, and we hope that we will get a response back, and I will update you once I receive a response.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Keighley?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a question about planning for new developments and provision of infrastructure. In my ward of Long Marston, significant development is anticipated under the upcoming local plan. Given the importance of ensuring that growth is matched with adequate services, could the leader outline what actions have been taken during the NPPF consultation to advocate for an infrastructure first approach so we can ensure that essential health, transport and education services are prioritised for the benefit of our communities? Thank you.
Yes, again, we have collaborated with lots of other organisations to be able to bring forward our response to the NPPF. The District Council's put a consultation response in, which it took into account the response from us as portfolio leader holders and from others, where we made it quite clear that infrastructure had to be an absolute first part of the any considerations that the government will take under the NPPF, remembering that this is a consultation. I also, again, and separate to what I did before, was I also took part in District Council Network and other organisations who were also considering response to the NPPF. The same response came up, that infrastructure had to be there first. But we were also written to the Minister saying that particularly when it comes to the south of the river and it comes down to Long Marston and that area, one of the crucial bits is the ability to be able to fund any infrastructure, particularly roads, to be able to, if any development is to take part in that area. We're yet to get a response back, but it is absolutely crucial. There's no way in which this district council can fund the kind of work that is needed south of the river and also on the major entrance into Stratford over Clopton Bridge. That cannot be funded by the district council or the county council. It needs government funding, and we've made that clear that that does need government funding. And in the South Warwickshire local plan, it is that particular hold up that has been highlighted, that it is any relief road that will not allow at the moment, unless we can get the finance, will not allow development south of the river to go across.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Fleming?
Thank you, Chair.
Can you turn your mic on, please, Councillor?
I'd been in post about 3 weeks when I got quizzed 18 months ago about the climate change fund of 800,000 that previous administration had set aside, and then in May, when you gloriously won in 2023, you had 1.3 million. You elaborated earlier, Leader, on the fact that the second 50k had now been released. What, if any, other projects or grants have been used for the benefit of all the SDC residents with the remaining of that 1.3 million?
A considerable amount of research has been going on. There are a couple of officers here that have done an amazing amount of work, and I really have to stress the kind of quality work that they've done. Some of that is to be able to match fund. So, for example, we were able to access the swimming pool fund, which aims to put sustainability, solar panels, etc., in to reduce the cost of heating the water in the swimming pool. But the district council will have to add to that, and we've put some money aside for that. We've also put some money aside for decarbonisation of the public buildings that the district council owns, like this building, for example, which has a considerable energy cost. So that some of that is being put forward into that, there is an officer that is looking and working on that, a project officer that is coming forward with those kind of plans. So the Community Climate Change Fund, which is a part of it, the second tranche is now to go forward and has been announced, and people are encouraged to apply for it. What the other side is that there has been considerable effort being put in by the Deputy Chief Executive to look at ways in which other organisations can be matched funds, or whether there could be soft loan structures that could be raised in order that we could reduce their climate footprint as well. So a lot of work is going on. I think it would be good once they're able to say for sure and exactly this is achieved. But the work is there and is ongoing, and a lot of work is ongoing, I can assure you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Pembleton?
Thank you, Chair. Pardon me. I have two questions, if I may, for the leader. The first question is £250,000 was put into the budget for the year prior to the last election around cost of living crisis. Can the leader tell us all how many families have benefited from the use of that monies to date? That's my first question.
I don't have the exact figure of exactly how many. I'm happy to be able to try and find that figure out, but it has been considered, it has been very, very useful, and so useful that we want to be able to repeat it. It's not only the cost of living aid, it's the organisations like Act on Energy and various other organisations that have been, and the food banks, for example, that have had that money from us. They've helped a lot of families, and I'd like to be able to put an exact figure on it. But I do know that, for example, the number of families that have had food parcels, I can give you that kind of figure. I can give you, if we go to Act on Energy, we can tell how many people have had energy efficiency advice, for example, and also fuel poverty advice. There's a lot of families have had fuel poverty advice. But I think I'm not sure of the exact figures, how many thousands, but it is in the thousands.
Thank you, Leader. I'll ask my second question, but preface it by perhaps the Leader might bring some numbers of actual results back to the next council meeting, if that's possible.
I'm happy to be able to find out those figures because it would be beneficial to us to know exactly how many people have been helped by that cost of living fund.
We're in agreement. If I turn to page 45 of today's papers, you outlined that one of the achievements was that a joint operation took place between the District Council's licensing team and the compliance team of City of Wolverhampton around concerns raised by the operation of Uber. It talks about the town, but it's across the district. And speaking as a member who has had to deal with the fallouts from perhaps some of the less than fantastic driving of an Uber driver. I'm quite, and again, you may see a theme here, Leader. What was the outcome of that joint operation? What are the tangible results that you were able to report back to this chamber in terms of how that operation is going to make a difference to residents' lives? Thank you.
Well, some of the detail is personal, so I probably can't say about individual cases, but I do know that there are some taxi drivers that have had their licence removed. But if you look at the licensing panel papers, you'll be able to see the outcome and the complete breakdown of that. There was quite a lot of detail in the licensing panel papers.
Thank you. Sulla Crump.
Thank you, Chair. Could Councillor Junid please confirm that Warwick District Council, our neighbour and a Green-led administration, I'm getting the Greens in there, Duncan, and partner in the 123 refuse and recycling contract, does not use HVO fuel in its refuse vehicles, and it does not have a HVO tank at its Warwick depot. Furthermore, is it true that the refuse vehicles that serve the east of the district, Southam, Stockton, Bishop Sittington, Napton, Long Hitchington, Lewis, operate from that depot, meaning probably that around 20% of SDC rounds, and probably a high percentage in terms of mileage, are not using HVO fuel, despite SDC spending £750,000 on it over the next 3 years. Once again, is the east of the district the poor relation in an initiative that is deemed suitable for the rest of the district? Thank you.
The issue was that the previous administration did the waste contract and signed that waste contract off. It was negotiated as a single contract, representing no hard border between Warwick District Council and Stratford District Council, but allowing BIFA to plan routes for maximum fuel efficiency. And that is part of the contract, that they can negotiate where the vehicles are to run from. The District Council owns 28 bin lorries, and they operate out of the Avenue Farm depot. A maximum of another 4 operate from the Warwick depot. And it is BIFA that makes that decision about which ones are going to be operated from where. You will be pleased to know that the first consignment of HVO has now been delivered, and a fixed cost for 3 years has been negotiated with BIFA, and that is the latest position. But it is up to BIFA, it is the contract that you, as an administration, signed off that allows that situation to be in place.
Before we continue, can I just say that we're coming up to the 3 hours of running of this particular meeting. Can I have your consent to carry on to finish the agenda today? Thank you. Councillor Crump, your second question.
Yes, thank you. Here's the follow-up. It's just a confirmation that the leader will be able to confirm, perhaps at a later date, that my figures are relatively accurate. And just some comment was that the HVO fuel wasn't in the original contract, I don't believe. So there was some contract variation and administration. So that as part of the variation, surely the administration would be allowed to specify what routes were used for HVO. Is that not correct?
My understanding is it's not correct. My understanding is that the contract, there was the contract about allowing BIFA to have a single contract representing no hard border, and a single contract that allowed BIFA to make use for fuel efficiency reasons which areas and which lorries come from which depots is part of the original contract. The variation is that which kind of fuel to be used is a separate part of the contract, and that part where it had the negotiation about the actual cost over 3 years. That was that part of that contract. But I can get you further information from the head of the department if you so wish, but that's my understanding of it. And the figures that you said, it's actually about 12% of the vehicles don't service, are not based in this area. It's up to 4. Okay.
I was asking about the rounds in terms, not the vehicles, but sorry.
And can I just make it quite clear, absolutely quite clear, that we're going to be following the Sustainability Commission's criteria, procurement criteria, but also that this is a transition strategy in order to be able to move to electric vehicles as soon as possible.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Littlewood?
Thank you, Chair. Leader, as I go to the parish council meetings in my ward, the most common question, in fact, it's almost 99% common, and the first question is with regards to planning. Until recently, it was about inappropriate anaerobic digesters, but I'm glad to say that it has been withdrawn by the applicant. The second most common is with regards to the emerging South Warwickshire local plan. This is because there's very little information out in the public, and that's somewhat understandable. But the concerns are growing, and the concerns are growing because whenever you get two organisations merging, even if they start off as equal partners, one always seems to win out in the end, and that's my experience. What guarantees to the residents of my ward can the leader give with regards to protection of interests, particularly with regards to planning services and resources?
The original merger and therefore the agreement for the South Warwickshire Plan, as you know, it predates myself. But one of the things that was agreed and still is the case is that a joint local plan between two authorities, because the majority of that local plan is about gathering evidence and getting reports from consultants, etc., that it is much more cost effective to have a joint local plan to be able to gather all that evidence. When it comes to the final decisions, there may be differences that come out as we look at our own particular areas, but all the gathering, all the starting of that local plan, it is cost effective that we continue to work together. And it is absolutely fundamental to me that I protect the interests of the residents. And I think, you know, at the moment we haven't seen anything that has contributed to anything else than that. We have all agreed that the NPF should be, and it was between the two, that we should look at infrastructure first as an absolute fundamental part of any consultation, anything that the government controls us over on planning. It has to be part of the South Warwickshire local plan that we look at infrastructure. We also wanted to raise, and it is in the consultation that was put in, that, for example, that there should be proper affordable housing, and I mean genuinely affordable housing, not a housing that is beyond the means of the majority of young people in this area. Genuinely affordable housing, and again, that was something that was supported by both authorities. So far, that all those kind of responses to the consultation on the NPPF have been accepted by both authorities. So that is very heartening. However, one thing that we now have to contend with is the change in national government. You know, we don't know quite what will come out from the final NPPF, and we will have to look at that because there will be more houses, but we have to make sure that if there are more houses, then there are more affordable houses, not just more houses that are 4, 5, 6 bedroom type houses. We do have to make sure that we have some agreement on that. The relations between the officers, they are working extremely well together, and we are all kept very, very briefed about everything going on up till now. It will be in the final detail where we will need to make sure that the final South Warwickshire local plan is properly representing this area and the interests of the residents of this area.
Thank you. Do you have a second question? Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that explanation. I much appreciate it. So, from what you've said, I can take it and go back to my residents in the parishes and explain that the need for building houses in the local district, i.e. in Stratford district, will be based on local need predominantly and before anything else, particularly for affordable housing.
For affordable housing, this district council's had a long history, and through your administration as well as our administration, of making sure that local needs housing, affordable housing, is supported, and we are continuing to do that. But what we have to contend with now is the change in government and change in the NPPF. We don't quite know what that will bring, but it will certainly bring a mandatory number of houses that will have to be built, and we have to be able to make sure that the majority of it is as affordable possible. But we've had a long history of making sure that we have local needs housing, but we also want to make sure that it is genuinely affordable, and also that we support housing associations going forward with the provision of social housing as well.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate your indulgence. What I'm really trying to get to is the fact that in a joint plan, there'll be a joint need. And what residents of my ward do not want to see is that the housing need that they're giving their land and their villages up to is not going to be for people in Warwick. And indeed, if that is the case, and we've seen the numbers in the State of the District report that was full of facts on this, the fact of the matter is we will be having people in this district having to travel a longer distance to work than is necessary. And that is not green and it's not sustainable.
I draw your attention to the last Cabinet paper, which had a review of the Housing Strategy Action Plan in it. And it would be worth your while reading that. It talks about the revised Sustainable Homes, Sustainable Communities strategy, the action plan going forward for 21, 20 to 26, and reviewing that one. It is worth having a look at that. And also, it's worth having a look at the next section in the Cabinet papers, which was about delivering local needs, local choice, rural housing, where we had a representative of the Rural Housing Enabler come to present to us, where we actually agreed the recommendation that the continuation of the existing approach set out in this report for delivering homes for local people in rural areas is endorsed, and we endorsed that, and that was passed at the Cabinet.
Thank you. Can we come up to our final question from Councillor Fradgley?
Thank you, Chair. My point here is what's been said about housing and the like. There's a planning application coming now for 200 houses just south, in the field just south of Waitrose. And what I would like to be assured that the infrastructure is in place before the houses start selling. Because we've got several incidents in Stratford where we've got the people living in the houses, but where do they go to school, etc.
I'm afraid I can't make a comment on an individual planning application, but I can say in the round that one of the things we have drawn attention to time and time again, and Councillor Couch has done this time and time again, is that a lot of the difficulties that have arisen in this district have been because infrastructure, and it's not just roads, it's GP surgeries, schools, have not been considered up front. That is something that we have are trying to make sure is changed in the South Warwickshire local plan, but in other documents as well. But we cannot comment on an individual case, so forgive me. That is a planning application that will come to the Planning Committee.
Thank you. That brings questions to the leader to a close, and we can now move on to item 15 on the agenda, motions on notice. Potential amendment, David, to advise.
Chair, thank you for that. Just to advise, you'll find on your desk, hopefully, a revised motion in relation to this particular item, which has been accepted as a friendly amendment from the proposal, the motion, Councillor Wally-Hoggins. So this is the motion that we will be debating. Thank you.
So I invite Councillor Wally-Hoggins to propose the motion. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just getting ahead of myself there. The notice of motion that the Conservatives proposed well in advance of this meeting is extensive and detailed. There are some that would question, why do we seek to involve Stratford District Council in national government matters? Why is it up to us to make a stand? Let me explain, because this really is personal for me. Some of you are aware that my mum is in the final few weeks of her life, as she has all but lost what has been a harrowing fight with cancer. Her main carer is my 88-year-old dad, and the loss of the winter fuel allowance for them is deeply upsetting and cruel at this heart-rending time. Mum's been in hospital for a while now as the palliative care team try to get her comfortable enough to be able to die in her own warm bed in their own warm house. During the last few weeks, I have encountered many elderly people who are not quite as lucky as Mum for the fundamental reason that they don't have a Sarah WH, also known as the daughter with dubious political leanings, and as we know, a daughter with a particular set of skills to advocate for them. I won't shock you with what I've needed to advocate for lately, but indulge me for a moment when I just say the following, please. Betsy Cadwallader Health Board, you really do need to explain why a very frail and frightened 78-year-old with only weeks to live and without adequate pain relief was left waiting for 8 hours in the back of an ambulance despite being an expected admission with a specific bed ready and waiting for her last week. However, I'm not digressing any further. One of my more harrowing encounters, as I've spent precious time with Mum, was a very frail and elderly lady who I will call Eileen. She was going home. She told me that she didn't want to go home because she was lonely. The last time I saw her, she was calling out her son's name. Christopher, please come. Christopher never came. I pray every night that she is okay and that her son did visit and does visit and that he is the sort of chap that can advocate for her. I don't know if she claims pension credit, so I don't know if she will receive her winter fuel allowance. I certainly don't know if she will be warm enough this winter. So, fellow councillors, I stand here before you as a daughter, a mother, a sister, a wife, a neighbour, a hospital visitor and proud citizen of Stratford-on-Avon and Great Britain. I am someone who stood for election precisely because of the Eileens in this world, who don't have a voice, who aren't heard, and who go unnoticed. I stood for election because I wanted to make a difference to the lives of others, and because I wanted to protect this corner of our world and to make it a better place. The removal of the winter fuel payment is abhorrent. The Labour government has demonstrated unequivocally that they don't care about our most vulnerable members of society. But I care, and I know that all of you do too, because there, but for the grace of God, go all of us. We must advocate for our elderly residents. By agreeing to the proposals before you, we will demonstrate that this council does care. We will demonstrate that all the residents in this district matter. Through the proposals made in this motion, we will ensure that every life matters to us by offering practical and immediate support and by being a loud voice. So I ask, on behalf of all of the Eileens and all of the elderly people, that the proposals in front of you are agreed and acted upon. I urge you to agree to this motion so that no time is wasted in helping our vulnerable residents access the support some of them desperately need. I ask you to do this so that no lives in this district are lost because our elderly residents couldn't afford to put the heating on this winter and for the rest of the winters that they have left to enjoy. It's time for everyone who cares about this issue to stand up and be counted.
Thank you. I invite Councillor Mills to second. Councillor Junior to second.
This is an amended motion, and there was a reason why I wanted to have this motion amended. Because one of the things that we must recognise is the work that has been done by this district council and our officers for quite some time to make sure that fuel poverty and fuel poverty action has been addressed. It was on September the 9th that it was raised in communications with officers here that the winter fuel campaign to make sure that because not everybody, remember, is able to access information online, that we should be able to give people the information they needed to inform on how to apply for pension credit, how they should ask for advice, and how they should get the benefits to which they're entitled. Hard copy information is being prepared by one of the officers and has been underway for quite some time. And there are 2 officers here who've been doing a lot of communications working as well. I believe a briefing note for councillors is also being prepared so that we can use it when we go out to talk to people. It is in this district, it's estimated that 30,200 people will be affected by the eligibility criteria. So it's crucial that of those, because not whole 30,000 will be able to get meet the criteria, that we help those that can. It is 3 years ago that I raised with Orbit cases in my own ward where people were unable to access boilers, where boilers were off. In one case was 6 weeks when I was off, and it was those case studies that I put into the Housing Association working group that the Ovarian Scrutiny was having a look at. 2 years ago, I remember calling on a lady in Ulster who was living and sleeping and in her living room, switching her fridge off at night in order to be able to save on the costs of fuel. So it was the complex caseworker at Act on Energy that went in to help give those kind of information. And we must remember that it was this district council 25 years ago that actually set up Act on Energy to be able to give the efficiency and advice work to our residents. And they have been funded by this council and continue to do so. So it was to make sure that in this amendment that we actually recognise all the work that is already currently being done by our staff, and also that not only by our staff, but the working relationships we have, the partnerships we have through the Social Inclusion Partnership and the GO Partnership, that we actually are working with others to make sure, and we have led on this as a council, and we will continue to lead on this as a council. We must make sure that everybody has that. I'm happy to be able to write a letter to a minister. I've written 2 letters already, or rather officers have written them on my behalf, but it has been sent to ministers, and I'm happy that another letter be raised. I'm happy that this should be raised in Parliament. I was really key, it was a key thing to me that both MPs for this district both voted against the cuts that had been proposed by the current government, and the MP who's here in this room raised in her column in the Herald several weeks ago now, that more action needed to be taken to address the local awareness campaign. And it was because she knew that we'd already raised it at this district council that she was able to put that in her column. But I just want to be able to say in this notice of motion, in this amended notice of motion, just to be able to highlight the work that is done by this council's officers who've put a tremendous amount of work into this to make sure that people are well served with information. Thank you.
Do any other members wish to speak? Right.
Should we take Councillor Passingham maybe?
Councillor Passingham.
The Green Group supports the sentiment of this motion. We agree that a good number of frail and elderly people, residents of the district, will be badly affected by the withdrawal of this winter fuel allowance. This is cruel and unnecessary at this time, with no notice and nothing in place to help these people that fall outside the criteria. And it is likely to cause extra winter deaths, which is a terrible thing to happen in these days. But we have to ask why so many people in this country are living in fuel poverty and food poverty. We didn't used to have 15% of people in fuel poverty and 20% of people in food poverty years ago. And the answer has got to be the gross amount of inequality that has arisen in this country over the last 15 to 20 years. And a lot of that is due to the failed policy of austerity of the previous government. This has failed in all sorts of ways, and in particular, it's failed poor people. So, and one area that the failed policy really showed up was in within mitigation measures to stop people getting cold in winter. For instance, the home insulation programme was slashed quite early on in the last government. Subsidies on things like heat pump were withdrawn and then started again, withdrawn, and the whole thing got so cocked up that people had to fill in so many big forms to get them. They never worked. And one of the biggest things that happened during all this time was the lack of investment in renewable energy generation. Yeah, North Sea wind was a success, but there's onshore wind, there's tidal, there's all the other forms of wind. We could have been independent of oil from overseas by this time if we'd invested properly. Now we are all left vulnerable to foreign oil and gas prices, and in particular, old people are vulnerable to this, and they're the ones that are really going to suffer. So the Green Group would like to propose another amendment to this motion and adding what would have been paragraph F, but now paragraph E. And we request that the leader of the council writes to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, calling on her to initiate a crash investment programme to improve energy efficiency of Britain's housing stock, with priority given to older and more vulnerable people.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Hatch.
Chairman, to help with the debate, we have had some copies printed. We'll just circulate those now quickly amongst council. Thank you. Well, yeah, your clock resets.
Can you put me down to speak?
This is an amendment.
We're just debating this now.
Absolutely. Do you want to clarify to the meeting? Right, just a minute to read the amendment and then I'll actually go to Councillor Whalley-Hoggins. I've been asked for a 5-minute journal, which I think might actually facilitate everybody to have proper discussions before we continue with the debate. So if there's agreement on that, 5-minute adjournment. Okay, councillors, if we can get back to the debate. Thank you. Can we actually get back to our chairs, please? Thank you. Thank you, councillors. What we are considering at the moment is the amendment just placed by the Greens. That is the subject for the debate, for the next debate, and a vote will be taken on that as to whether it is accepted to go into the substantive motion or not. As an addition. Are you happy with that? Okay. Any speakers on this? Kate, do you want to speak? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Rolfe. Do we need to vote on the
Right.
Oh, no, sorry, I haven't called yet. We're just making names.
Oh.
Okay.
Say Councillor Rolfe.
Councillor Wally Hoggins, please.
This is not a friendly. This is not a friendly amendment. Green Group, this is an entirely different motion that you're proposing here, and I suggest that you need to do your own notice on motion at the next full council meeting, because this is about fuel efficiency, what you're proposing. This is not about the winter fuel allowance for our elderly and vulnerable residents. The elderly and the elderly fuel allowance is something. The total cost across the country is £1.6 billion. That is what it costs to pay that. The friendly amendment that you're making here is to do with fuel efficiency. It's got absolutely no place whatsoever to be part of the proposals that we're making today. And I think you've been. I think this is audacious, and I think it also dilutes the very serious matter that we've brought to the fore today. And within that, you know, the two main parties have worked in a collegiate manner in order to bring this here. There was compromise on both sides, but I am deeply saddened, and I think this is a reflection of just not concentrating on our most vulnerable residents, and I'm deeply discomforted that you bring this to the fore within the winter fuel allowance notice on motion. And I therefore reject wholeheartedly, as do my group, this proposal in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rolfe.
Thank you, Chair. So at the risk of being shot down, what I was going to say before this amendment came through is that I attended full council at County 2 weeks ago, and there was an over 2-hour debate on this, exactly the same question. It went on and on and on, and everybody seemed to want to have their say. What I was going to suggest is that as we are all broadly in agreement, can we not go straight to the vote on this, please? Because actually, it's 5:30, and I think some of us would like to go home. I've got a meeting tonight, and I want to eat in between. So once we've dealt with this amendment, please can we, Chair, go straight to the vote rather than any more speakers on this? I think we are all broadly in agreement. Thank you.
Councillor Juned.
This happens to be an area of my professional background, so it is something that I've been pushing for a long time, that we should have much higher standards in new build, but also have more work done on retrofit. The UK's 28 million residential homes account for 16% of carbon emissions, and one of the key parts is improving energy efficiency. If we had improved energy efficiency at the rate at which we should have done, starting from about 25 years ago, we wouldn't have had people in the fuel poverty area, people without being able to pay their bills. It would have been a much better, much more equal line on benefit on people being able to pay their bills. There might still have been some people that couldn't, but there would have been a much better position. The Climate Change Committee said in 2023 that decarbonisation of our homes in this country are significantly off track. And one area that is particularly off track is rented homes. And this was something that the previous government was going to do something about. It hasn't happened. I hope it will be taken up again, because some of our rented homes are of particularly poor standard, and they're the people that tend to be on the lowest income are in rented homes, particularly private rented homes. Sometimes some of them are of particularly poor standards. The previous government's delays in implementing the low-carbon building regulations have benefited house builders and property developers by billions of pounds over the last 9 to 10 years, and house owners have had to bear the cost of making sure that those houses are brought up to standard. Or people like us, as a district council and others, have had to bear the cost of either bringing them up to standard or being able to pay for the benefits or the impact of people that are on low incomes. The county council social services have had to bear the cost of people that are not able to stay healthy in their own homes. Many of the new builds are far from future-proofed. And it was a 2015 ministerial statement on plan making that originally drove the change in the Future Home Standard. And that statement on plan making continues to create confusion. There is a lot of confusion between what is the law, and the law is Climate Change Act 2008. The law is the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act of 2014, as upgraded on 2018. The law, but the planning policy is advice.
I've just had a point of order from Councillor Littlewood.
Chair, thank you. To my understanding, this debate, although we've not moved to the debate as such yet, is about winter fuel allowance. And we have just listened, and with great respect, Leader, to a whole paragraph or 3 on housing. This is not what it's about. If you want to talk about housing, up the budget to, instead of £300 per household or £200 per household, up it to £20,000 to £30,000 per home. It's a totally different thing. This is a distraction, if I may say so, and I think we should revert back to the motion in hand, please.
Can I just...
Sorry, can I just say, my understanding is that this late presented amendment has to be debated and voted on before we can get back to the substantive motion. May I have advice on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. That would be correct. So we've had a proposed amendment. We have to go through the process of hearing and then voting on it, and then thereafter, whatever's decided, then the question will be put.
Can you complete your statement?
Had we had houses built to the proper standard, or houses properly energy efficiency fitted and insulated 10 to 20 years ago, we would not have the fuel poverty crisis that we have today. We just would not. It was the reason why this council set up Act on Energy to give energy efficiency advice 25 years ago. It was to make sure that people were given the advice in order to be able to insulate their homes. There was grant funding given to enable people to insulate their homes. Then in 2015, most of that was withdrawn due to a ministerial statement. If you insulate your homes to a high standard, you do not pay the high energy costs. It was short-sighted to make sure that it was short-sighted not to recognise that energy costs were going to rise, and they have continued to rise. There are a number of reasons why energy costs have risen. They've caused this crisis. It was the war in Ukraine. It was the COVID crisis. It was many, many other things. But these were all part and parcel of making sure that we got to this state where people could not pay their bills, and we could have prevented it had we done the correct thing in 2015. Had we taken those actions in 2015, we would not have people in fuel poverty today.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Parker?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to assure all members of this meeting today that this was not a cynical addition to the motion. It was meant in a friendly and in collegiate manner, and really it was simply there to recognise the fact that the excellent motion is calling for immediate and short-term action, which is definitely needed, but we need to represent in this motion to understand the underlying cause of the situation we're in, which Councillor Juned has laid out very, very clearly to us, and to embed that in this motion so that we do not have to redebate this same motion in 30 years' time or 20 years' time or a decade from this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Organ?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to second Councillor Rolfe's call for the vote. Go to vote.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Pemberton?
I think Councillor Organ would like a point of order, question answered. I think before I start, I think she's raised the question.
May I just say, it is the same that I've just said before. This is a debate on the late amendment. This has to be debated and voted on. If it is approved, it becomes part of the motion. If it is voted down, the original substantive motion stands for debate.
A point of order, if I may. Councillor Rolfe called for a vote. We were discussing the amendment. I've seconded it that. Surely council procedure rules means that if our further amendment is carried, then we go to the vote on the amendment here.
Apologies, Councillor Organ. Monitoring officer will give a view.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, motions without notice are allowed where a question can be put, but we're not actually on the motions without notice. We started with the amendment first. That process needs to be completed.
Well, that's
May
clear
I
as
call on
mud, then,
Darren
isn't it?
Pemberton to continue?
Timing's everything. You beat my punchline there. Yeah, that's as clear as mud. Collegiate. The leader had a conversation with the shadow leader about the amendment. There's been no such discussion. Alone in this county, where this has been debated across the county and up and down the land, are we proposing to have a hijack? And that's what this is. The motion is about winter fuel allowance. The question about security of, the question about energy efficiency is an entirely different thing. I'm surprised there hasn't been a point of order about this amendment. So moves the substantive nature of the original notice on motion, which is about a specific issue, winter fuel allowance. Absolutely, if you want to have a motion, a debate about energy efficiency of housing stock, absolutely, bring it on. I doubt you'll get a lot of pushback on that. But this is neither the time nor the place. This is a time where, regardless almost, with probably one exception, red, just to fill in the blanks, everybody seems to think this is a poor idea, and you guys are coming along trying to just move the goalposts. I don't think this is absolutely an amendment you can really go with at all. And I would like to the monitoring officer's view on whether it changes it so substantially that we shouldn't debate it. But for the avoidance of doubt, we should be rejecting this amendment. We should focus on the key issue, which is sending a message about the winter fuel allowance. If you want to have an energy efficiency housing stock discussion, that's for next time. But reject this amendment, I certainly will, and I would hope that everybody in this room would be on the same page.
Thank you, Councillor Coucher.
Chair, I think I don't agree with that. I mean, I think this is entitled Protecting the Most Vulnerable Pensioners from Fuel Poverty. And clearly the amendment that we've had from the Greens emphasises that helping vulnerable older people. My view is we should support this amendment and certainly support the substantive motion, which is something which I think we all can sign up to. And I think if we can get on with that, then we can conclude this, and Councillor Rolfe can go home and have a tea.
Thank you. May I call on
Chair, I have asked for an opinion from the monitoring officer, please.
I've got a point of order as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just on the issue of whether or not this is an amendment that should be allowed. Firstly, that's a decision for yourself as the politicians, and I've heard opposing points about whether or not it should be included or not, which already is a clue in the discussion of itself, i.e. is it so relevant to the original motion? And that's the question that needs to be answered. Given that we've heard two sides of the coin, I can't interfere on that. It's a political decision on which you need to move through the amendment decision.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Shenton?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Parker has mentioned that this was a friendly amendment in a collegiate manner, and Councillor Pemberton raised this. If it was in a friendly manner, why didn't it come before us sooner, rather than trying to hijack us in the middle of a meeting? I'm with Councillor Rolfe on the subject of what happened at County. It went on for 2 hours, and I have a nice long speech as well for about winter fuel payments. This amendment has nothing to do with winter fuel payments. Councillor Junod has mentioned that if we'd if everyone had insulated their homes to a high standard, then we wouldn't be in this position. Well, that seems to be saying that it's the fault of the pensioners. Surely that's not what this motion is about. Winter fuel allowance. The subject of insulation is a totally different subject altogether. I would recommend that we reject this amendment and get back to the substantive motion, not this.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Crump?
Thank you, Chair. I want to say there's allegedly a black hole in the country's finances of 22 billion or something that has been found. The winter fuel allowance is designed to save 1.6 billion. Using similar numbers in terms of investing in houses to make them energy efficient, we're talking about 20,000 a property probably, maybe more. And just extrapolating that, a similar energy efficiency improvement bill is likely to cost £100 billion plus. And how likely is that going to happen? And how quickly is that going to happen? The winter fuel allowance is been taken away at very short notice and would make an immediate tangible effect to residents in our district, of which 25% of our population, according to the report, are over 65. Another 22%, which makes 47, by the way, are between 50 and 65. And I'm in that one, just. I won't say which end I'm on, but I'm in that one. But this is ridiculous. We're totally taking away something that might happen. Somebody mentioned about being alive in 30 years' time. Well, in 30 years' time, we might get this energy efficiency, but the pensioners we're trying to look after now won't be, because this will take far too long. And this is a pointless motion. Crash investment as well. Used to be a phrase, marry in haste, repent at leisure. Invest in haste, repent at leisure.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Adams?
Thank you, Chair. It feels like this amendment has come as sort of a bit of a shot in the dark. I know my party supports it nationally. I support the thrust of it, but I'm not comfortable with the way in which it's come forward at this point, or the fact that the administration and the main opposition have worked together towards a very meaningful, substantive motion on something I think we've we all care very deeply about, and obviously there's been a lot of talk about it. That's my feelings on the matter. I feel that this is something I'm going to vote against on that for those reasons, not because I don't support the thrust of where they're going with it, but because it's not cohesive with the motion that's been put forward, and I would welcome the Greens to submit something in short order in a future meeting that allows us to take more meaningful action as a council body. That's how I want to vote, and that will allow me to vote for the motion that we have been working towards in a positive manner. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Holmes?
The points I wanted to raise have been covered. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Councillor Pertigella?
Thank you, Chair. I have heard from countless pensioners worried about how they will afford their energy bills this winter, and I've heard heartbreaking stories of residents choosing between heating and eating, and from families concerned about their loved ones. The government's cruel plans will mean more elderly pensioners will end up in hospital, and therefore it won't save money in the long term. So I fully support the substantive motion. Stripping support from many of the poorest pensioners just when energy bills are set to rise again this winter is a callous thing to do without a proper review or notice or impact assessment. We know that the winter fuel payment will have millions of the most vulnerable in our society losing out on vital support. And we must continue locally and nationally to make the case to reverse this callous cut and to broaden the targeting of the winter fuel allowance, and also to simplify the pension credit application. But I also agree that until we have a national retrofit plan, we will have future pensioners and other households suffering again and again in our cold, poorly insulated homes. So for that reason, I will support the amendments by the Greens. Thank you.
I believe the last speaker on this will be Councillor Rolfe, before we go to David.
Okay. Well, I didn't expect that, did I? Okay, so I think what you've come forward with has blindsided us all, frankly, and I actually think that what you're saying has nothing to do with the motion that's been put forward. So I'm going to ask you a very simple question, whether you would consider bringing this forward at the next full council so it can be properly debated, so that we can go to the motion, we can go to the vote on the motion, and we will then, because I just think we're going off in tangents here, I would really like you to consider that. I don't think any of us have had long enough to discuss what you've put forward. As I say, it's now 10 to 6. If you would be prepared to come back next time with this in a proper motion, I would be delighted to debate it at full length. But I do think we need to look at this, the motion that most of us have agreed on. If I can make that proposal, I've had a seconder. Can we go to the vote, please? That would be my proposal. Thank you.
My advice is we have to go to the vote on the amendment first. So David has to sum up. We have that vote, and then we actually go to the substantive. Councillor Passingham.
Right. I would remind everybody that the motion that was put forward was entitled Protecting Our Most Vulnerable Pensioners from Fuel Poverty. And if the previous government had carried out these measures, we wouldn't be in this problem now, as has been repeated a few times. And if we don't do something now and delay the decision again because of various financial reasons, that's not going to help. We need to find the money to help the poorest and most vulnerable people in this country, and it needs to be done now. And otherwise, as previous speakers have said, we'll be back here with winter fuel allowance.
Excuse me, we can't have discussions. We can't have discussions during a councillor addressing the issues. So please can we actually listen to what Councillor Pemberton has to say?
Yes. So, I mean, the motion, the amendment to the motion is requesting that a letter be written to the Chancellor of the Exchequer asking that a crash programme is done in terms of improving energy efficiency in everybody's house, because there are houses, there are vulnerable people that aren't pensioners, but particularly priority is for vulnerable pensioners. And that, I think, is the intention of the original motion, and the original title it would cover the amendment that we're putting.
Thank you. I'm now going to move... Oh, yes, Councillor.
Sorry, so will you consider answering my question that I asked you, please?
I think... no, I think everybody is... most people here have said that it's important...
Then we're going to move to the vote in that case. Okay. Thank you. Will you please raise your hand if you are in favour of this... do we have to have a vote on that, or is that...
Is that seconded?
Is that seconded? Thank you. There's a recorded vote on this then.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just to explain that we are now taking a recorded vote whether you're for, against or abstaining in relation to the amendment that's been put forward by the Green Party. I will call your names individually, so if you could please indicate when I call your name whether you're for, against or abstaining. So I will start with Chairman of Council, Councillor Jenny Fradgley.
For.
Councillor Vice Chairman of Council, Councillor Kate Rolfe.
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Adam.
Against.
Councillor Alcock.
Against.
Councillor Bromwich is absent. Councillor Coles.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Coucher.
For.
Councillor Crump.
Against.
Councillor Fleming.
Against.
Councillor Ian Fradgley.
For.
Councillor Gist.
For.
Councillor Grocott.
For.
Councillor Harmer.
For.
Councillor Harvey is now absent. Councillor Hatch.
For.
Thank you. Yeah, I got that. Thank you. Councillor Hencher Seraphin.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes.
For.
Councillor Johnston.
For.
Councillor Junid.
For.
Councillor Keithley is now absent. Councillor Littlewood.
Against.
Councillor Mills.
Against.
Councillor Organ.
Against.
Councillor Ostrander.
For.
Councillor Padgham is now absent, sorry, thank you. Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Parry. Left. Councillor Passingham.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Pertigella.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Petrovic.
For.
Councillor Rice.
For.
Councillor Rock.
For.
Councillor Scorer.
Against.
Councillor Shenton.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner. No. Skinner. Councillor Woolley Hoggins.
Against.
Thank you. I make that 18 votes for, 11 against with 2 abstentions. So that amendment now forms part of the overall amendments, which I understand will be taken individually.
We can now begin. I'm very sorry about this. I am devastated that you did not listen to my personal speech, that the Eileens of this district are not being listened to, that you have chosen to dilute what was a really strong amendment that we worked together in a collegiate approach. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, with profound regret, at this stage, we withdraw our notice on motion. Thank you.
Therefore, the motion is withdrawn. There is no need to continue the debate, as I understand, and there will be no vote. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We can now go on to item. What was it? Item. Let's give you a better choice. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Urgent
And
business.
our motion then became part of that. Excuse me, you haven't quite finished the meeting yet. Item 16 is urgent business. I understand there is no urgent business, so the meeting is closed at 6 minutes.
It's just simple amendment. I just can't understand why.